Humans were supposed to be cowards. The Galactic Federation Species Registry had them listed as a 2 of 16 on the Aggression Index. Our interactions with the Terran Union up until this point supported those conclusions. They had not fought any wars amongst themselves in centuries, and had formed a unified world government prior to achieving FTL travel. They had responded with eagerness rather than hostility to first contact, unlike many species. Earth had resolved every dispute through diplomacy and compromise since it became an official member of the Federation. For example, a few years ago, the expansionist Xenic claimed a Terran mining colony as their territory. The Federation braced itself for a minor conflict, as they expected the humans to defend their outpost. But the humans simply shrugged and agreed to hand off the planet for a small yearly fee. Rather than going to war, the Terrans somehow ended up as prominent trading partners for the Xenic. There was also an incident where the paranoid Horde Al arrested Terran ambassadors on charges of being spies. Imprisoning diplomats with zero evidence was a clear provocation to war, but the humans did nothing. They didn't even raid the facility where their representatives were being held. They simply opened back-channel negotiations with the Horde Al and arranged a prisoner exchange, swapping a few smugglers for their people. Thoughts on the humans varied depending on who you asked. Some in the Federation found their pacifism commendable and appreciated their even-tempered statesmanship. Others thought that it was weakness that led them to avoid war. I was in the latter camp. The only reason not to respond to blatant insults with aggression was that they didn't have the wits or strength for it. When the Devourers came, the 3 most militaristic species in the galaxy, as per the Aggression Index, banded together to stand against their approach. We didn't know much about them, but we called them the Devourers since their sole mission was to drain stars of their energy. I can't tell you why they would do such a thing. Whatever their reasons, they would take one system by force, suck it dry, and then move on to the next. Our fleet, the finest the Federation had to offer, suffered heavy losses when we clashed with enemy destroyers. We fought as hard as we could, and it didn't matter. Our weapons hardly seemed to scratch their ships. It was a tough decision, but I ordered what was left of the fleet to retreat. As much as we needed to stop them, we would lose the entire armada if we stuck around any longer. I sent out a distress signal, relaying our grim situation and pleading for reinforcements. There were other species with the lesser, but still potent militaries within the Federation, but my request was returned with silence. Not a single one of those cowards volunteered to help. Hearing of our defeat, I suppose they decided to flee and fend for themselves. I thought we were on our own, until we detected human ships jumping to our position. How ironic. The only ones who came to our aid were the Galactic pushovers. There were only 5 of them, according to our sensors, which was not nearly enough to mount a fight. A pathetic showing. But it was more than 0 ships that had been sent by the other Federation powers.
Sir, the Terrans are hailing us. What do they think they're gonna do? Talk the enemy to death?
First Officer Blaise quipped. I heard a few snickers from my crew, but quickly shushed them. We need all the help we can get. On screen, a dark-haired human blinked onto the view screen.
Federation vessel, this is Commander Mikhail Rykov of the Terran Union. We're here to assist you in any way possible.
I bowed my head graciously. Thank you for coming, Commander Rykov. I am General Keelon. Please join our formation and help cover our retreat.
Retreat?
The human commander blinked a few times, looking confused.
Our intentions are to engage and terminate the enemy.
With 5 ships. All due respect, the Devourer's number is in their thousands, and they crushed our fleet of equal magnitude. I wouldn't expect a peaceful species like yours to understand warfare, but it's in your interest to follow our lead, I said. Commander Rykov seemed even more confused.
You think humans are a peaceful species? What the hell? Why would you think that?
Well, you never fight with anyone. You resolve everything with talk. Humans are the lowest rated species on the Aggression Index, I replied.
I see. The Federation has misjudged us there. Do you know why we avoid war, General?
Because you don't think you can win? Fear? The human laughed heartily.
Ha ha ha! No. It's because we know what we are. What we're capable of. and nobody's deserved that quite yet.
The idea of Terrans making ominous threats would have been a joke to me before now, but something in Rykov's tone told me he believed what he was saying with conviction. This was a clear case of delusion, stemming from a lack of experience with interstellar warfare. The Devourers would make fools of the Earthlings and punish them for their overconfidence. However, if the commander really wanted to send his men to a slaughter, I would not stop him. If you insist on fighting, I certainly won't stand in your way. But know that you're on your own. We're getting out of here. What is your plan? I asked.
We brought a nanite bomb we developed. We've never actually used one before, since in about 5% of simulations they didn't stop with localized entities and consume all matter in the universe.
Commander Rykov said this way too casually for my liking.
But we programmed them to self-destruct after a few seconds, which will probably work. Ensign Carter, fire at the enemy in 5 seconds.
My eyes widened in alarm. Wait, hold up, you just said it could destroy everything. The Terran flagship fired a missile before I could get in another word to stop them. At first, I thought that they had missed their mark. The projectile sailed through the Devourer fleet, not connecting with a single ship. Then, it detonated at the rear of the formation, and all hell broke loose. Space itself seemed to shudder as an explosion tore through anything in its vicinity. The force was so powerful that our sensors could only provide an error message as measurement. At least a third of the Devourer fleet was instantly vaporized, as an improbable amount of energy and heat turned them into metal soup. There was no way any occupants of those ships lived through that. The enemy vessels further out from Ground Zero survived the initial blast, though many of them sustained heavy damage. But an invisible force seemed to be slowly dissecting each of them. I could only watch in disbelief as the mighty cruisers disintegrated bit by bit. I suppose the bomb had thrown out a swarm of nanobots, which had attacked the ship's structure on a molecular level. The Devourers hardly knew what hit them. By the time they thought to return fire, there was nothing left to return fire with. Their arsenal evaporated in a matter of seconds, and undoubtedly their personnel suffered the same fate. Where there had once been an unstoppable army, now only stood empty space. The humans had unleashed a wave of destruction that was unrivaled by anything I had ever seen in my military career, with just a single missile. Horror shot through my veins at the thought that they might one day turn their monstrous weapons on the Federation. There was no way to defend oneself against such diabolical creations. The aggression index needed an update. The kind of species that would invent weapons like that was no two. Glancing around at my crew, I saw stunned and aghast reactions that mirrored my own. If they ever became hostile, the humans represented a threat of the highest level. They could more than likely wipe out the entire galaxy without breaking a sweat.
No, that's taken care of. You should have just invited us to the party to start with.
Commander Rykov grinned.
Tell you what, General, next time we meet, you owe us a beer.
I frowned. The humans could ask for much more than a drink if they wanted to. Yeah, I think we can do that. Commander Rykov terminated the call, and I watched as the Terran ships warped back into hyperspace. I was still trying to wrap my mind around the whole thing, and I wondered how I was going to put this into words for the combat report. The Federation had no idea who the Terrans truly were, but I was going to make sure that they did. And as I played the events of the day over in my mind, it clicked. I finally understood why such a powerful species would not show its hand. The humans avoid war because it would be too easy for them to win.
The Federation Senate was expecting the worst when the messenger arrived. As per Galactic customs, the fastest ship was sent ahead of the fleet to provide a first-hand account of the battle to the ambassadors. The terrified look on the young Jatari ensign's face as he entered the Senate chamber seemed to confirm everyone's fears. I remembered the transmission we had received just a few hours ago, detailing the grim predicament of those who had confronted the Devourers. The numbers of confirmed losses had already been hefty, and without any Federation members sending in backup, we could be looking at as much as 90% casualty rate. As Speaker, I had tried to persuade the mid-tier aggression species to offer assistance, but they all flatly refused. If I had the power to force them to go, I would have, We all knew about the trail of destruction the Devourers left in their wake, but we had no choice but to stop them. They would push us to the brink of extinction if we allowed them to plough through our galaxy. There were a few odd points to the messenger's behaviour, however. As he walked up to the podium, he locked eyes with Terran Ambassador Nicky Johnson and swallowed nervously. I noticed that his hands were shaking. The Jatari were a proud, honour-driven race who had seen the horrors of war time and time again. Never before had I seen one return home looking like they'd seen a ghost. And why would his fixation be on the peaceful humans of all races?
Hello, Senators. I'm Incentellus.
The Herald's gaze had not left Ambassador Johnson.
The Devourers have been defeated. Not a single one of their ships survived.
Surprised murmurs spread through the assemblage. I was puzzled as well. The earlier correspondence had painted a hopeless picture for our men. If there had really been such a drastic turn of events, we needed to know how it had happened. Whatever tactics the fleet had employed could be passed on to other commanders for future encounters. A quick glance across the room revealed most of the representatives in a state of confusion. But the Terran ambassador was smirking, a predatory glint in her eyes. There was something about her expression that unsettled me deep in my subconscious. I leapt to my hooves, keen on restoring order. Silence! How is this possible? Please explain.
Well, Madam Speaker, it was the humans. They only sent a few ships to our aid, but they built something awful.
The ensign's voice had dropped to hardly more than a whisper.
It was like they harnessed a supernova. Never in my life have I seen such destruction.
Utter chaos erupted as shocked exclamations rose to a crescendo, and all heads turned towards Ambassador Johnson. I wasn't sure I believed this account of the battle. The humans, possessing some terrible weapon capable of destroying the Devourers. It was common knowledge that they avoided war at all costs. Zanik Ambassador Kazil laughed and raised a talon to speak.
Respectfully, the humans are not a fighting species. Savvy, cunning, greedy, they are all these things. But if they had weapons that could wipe out the Devourers, they'd be more than talkers and diplomats. They'd rule the galaxy by now.
The Zanik were in the upper echelons of aggressive species, but were also humanity's primary trading partner. The Terran Union had won them over with their willingness to sell anything for a price, and despite differing philosophies on violence, the two powers had become close allies.
You're wrong. I saw it with my own eyes.
Ensign Tellus replied.
The truth of humanity is that they are killers. They are dangerous. The General thinks we should seek their friendship, but I'm not sure I agree. I don't trust them.
I turned my gaze to Ambassador Johnson. We should let the Terran representative answer. What do you have to say? Is this true? Ambassador Johnson sighed wearily.
Yes, it's true. Earth's many last resort weapons stashed away. We are very good at warfare, but we try to find a different way.
Why did you present us with a false image of your species? I demanded. You speak of peace, and yet you've been hiding away the strongest weapons in the galaxy.
We never wished to use them,
she said.
Your aggression index. The high aggression species are often territorial and seek to conquer. If your Federation had looked into our history, you would have seen that we were once like that. We lost millions of lives in wars between our factions, and we grew tired of all that bloodshed. Humanity has tried to be better. Our destructive, impulsive nature is still there. We just buried it deep. You see, we are the only aggressive species to have a strong sense of empathy as well. We grapple with that duality constantly. We control ourselves with rules, and for the most part, we choose good. But we know the depths of depravity that exist. We knew that one day someone truly evil would come along, and we would have to be worse.
I digested her words, my mind still reeling. A war with one's own species that had millions of casualties. Even the worst conflicts in the Jatari's early history numbered around 200,000 dead, and they were 15 of 16 on the aggression scale. The bloodiest war we had previously known of didn't hold a candle to the humans' past. A species with that much of a propensity for violence should have killed itself off. There was no way they should be able to form a functioning society, let alone to think that they were acting as the galactic peacemakers. It was hard to reconcile my experiences with civilized, smooth-tongued human diplomats with the vile history Ambassador Johnson had described. No matter how much the humans claimed to be able to control their savagery, we could not trust them. A species with such a drive to violence could easily stab you in the back in a moment of anger and think nothing of it. Honestly, if I wasn't afraid of retaliation, I would have raised a motion to oust the Terran Union from the Federation then and there. But even if it was playing with fire, it was probably better to have them on our side than to have them turn their artillery on us. We would have to monitor them much more closely, though. I forced a neutral expression. You did save us from an enemy we could not beat on our own, but you owe you a great debt. It will take some time for the Federation to fully consider what you have just told us, but we thank you for ending the war. Ambassador Johnson's eyes hardened.
The war is not over, Speaker. We defeated one fleet, but the Devourers will send more if they are not eliminated, and they only would come back stronger. Humanity does not expect your blessing, but we do ask for your forgiveness for what we are about to do.
What are you about to do? I asked cautiously.
We are going to strike their homeworld with antimatter bombs. No survivors. It is a permanent solution. It may not be pretty, but we don't see any other options to put an end to the terror they subject the rest of the cluster to.
Even the most aggressive species looked appalled at the suggestion. I noticed the ambassadors in closest proximity to the human edging away, as though they were afraid she might bite. I shook my head fervently. That is genocide. The Federation cannot accept the eradication of an entire species. Please, let us try to negotiate a truce. We must exhaust peaceful avenues before even considering an attack like this.
You cannot reason with someone who only wants to destroy you. Kill or be killed.
Ambassador Johnson rose from her seat, collecting her belongings.
How many innocent species have already perished by their hands? As far as we're concerned, it's better them than us.
The Terran representative exited the building, waving farewell to Ambassador Kazil as she departed. I could not fathom how any sentient could be so calm and detached at the prospect of glassing a planet, even one of a parasitic race like the Devourers. I wondered if we should at least make some sort of attempt to stand in the humans' way. It was unlikely we could stop them, but at least we could say we tried. Things were simpler when we had thought they were peaceful. A part of me wished that the lie could have lasted for just a bit longer. I missed our pacifist friends already.
I had feared that the humans might attack us as soon as our ships entered the Sol system, but the fact that we were still here was a good sign. The Federation Senate had narrowly voted to confront the Terrans, with Speaker Ula being one of the most ardent supporters of the motion. Even with her political pull, many representatives were on the fence about taking action. The fate that had befallen the Devourers could easily be ours as well if we provoked the humans. Honestly, I think if it were their own species being summoned to action, the Senate would not have passed a proposal. But as always, they assumed that the Chitauri, the Zanuck, and the Horda Al would do their dirty work, while they stood by and watched from the safety of their offices. I was less than thrilled about leading this mission. After all, we were risking Federation lives to protect the people that had sought to destroy us. While the Terran solution was extreme, I could at least understand where they were coming from. But it would be dishonorable to refuse a direct order. The last thing I wanted was to be branded a traitor and a coward. Besides, if I commanded the fleet, I would at least be level-headed enough not to charge into battle against a superior army. I wasn't sure my cohorts who had not witnessed human weaponry in action firsthand would be so cautious, especially given that most Chitauri officers view diplomacy as an admission of weakness. First Officer Blaze glanced up from his computer as we passed the first of the outer planets.
Sir, we're almost within missile range of Earth. Should we ready our weapons?
Our orders are to stop them, not attack them. If we get into a direct fight, we're doomed, I replied. Let's hope that the humans still like talking. Hail Terran Command. Blaze opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. He silently input a few commands into his terminal, muttering under his breath. The first few moments that the call went unanswered were nerve-wracking. I feared that the humans would simply ignore it. Relief washed over me as a familiar face blinked onto the view screen. Commander Rykov did not look well. His black hair was disheveled, his uniform was wrinkled, and dark circles had taken up residence under his eyes. This was a far cry from the radiant and confident man who had come to our rescue yesterday. It seemed like he should be resting rather than on the bridge of a ship, for I feared pointing out his condition would cause offence. The human officer stared into the camera, a pleading look on his face.
General, we strongly advise you to turn your ships around and stand aside.
I can't do that. What you're about to do is wrong. Intelligent life is sacred, and killing off an entire species is a crime against sentience, I said.
The Devourers have hardly shown that they are sapient. I'm surprised you of all people would rush to their defense.
Rykov mused.
It hasn't even been a full day since they wiped out thousands of your ships. You and I both know that if we hadn't shown up, they would have killed all of you without a second thought.
I flinched. Don't remind me. For all that they've done, I don't want to see an entire species slaughtered. That makes us just as bad as them. Their actions don't make yours right. Commander Rykov sighed.
Well, it seems that we're at an impasse. I assume you're going to attack us if we don't stand down.
We just want to talk. You don't have to do this. Your species has a moral code, right? I took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts. What if there are innocent people, children and civilians on their homeworld?
Look, I don't like what we're about to do, but I have my orders. We don't even know if they have civilians, or if they can show emotion.
Exactly. We don't know. What's the harm in waiting and getting more information? Don't you want to know why they're doing this?
I'd like to understand.
Rykov tilted his head as though thinking.
I suppose it wouldn't hurt to gather some intelligence. Hell, it might even come in handy down the road. What would you suggest?
Do you think you can capture one of their ships? We need to bring one of them in alive.
Yeah, I think we can do that, General. What would you say to joining us in person on our flagship? We would rather stand together than as enemies.
I weighed my options. This could easily be some sort of human trickery, luring the highest-ranking Federation officer to their headquarters just to be imprisoned. Taking me out of the picture would disrupt our fleet's command. It was only natural to find their offer a bit suspect. But I figured if Rykov's intentions toward us were malicious, we wouldn't be having this dialogue in the first place. The Terrans had the ability to knock out our entire fleet in one fell swoop, yet they had not fired upon it. At any rate, I still owed the commander a great debt for saving my life. The least I could give him was a bit of trust. I'd be happy to join you, Commander, I answered. The hint of a smile crept onto Rykov's face.
Excellent. We'll await your shuttle. Come alone and unarmed. Please order your ships to halt their advance and allow us passage.
The transmission ended, and First Officer Blaise immediately piped up.
Sir, you can't be seriously thinking of going over there.
I scowled at him, not appreciating my decisions being called into question. I have to. It's our only chance of talking the humans down, and it will be the first time anyone has spoken with the enemy firsthand. Of course, any insight I could glean into the Devourer's nature would be priceless to the Federation, but I would be lying if I said my curiosity wasn't personal. I delighted in the possibility of demanding their reasons myself. Mass murder was not the solution, but our foes needed to be held accountable for the losses they had inflicted. 2 Terran soldiers were waiting in the airlock as my shuttle docked. The pat-down they gave me felt a bit invasive, but I suppose they just wanted to be thorough. Once they were satisfied that there were no weapons on my person, they led the way to the bridge. Compared to the Federation vessels, the Terran flagship was downright ugly on the inside. The passageways were cramped, and the colours were a drab mix of grey and off-white. It was evident the humans gave little consideration to design elements, rather focusing on packing the warship with as many weapons and stations as possible. I couldn't help but feel a bit claustrophobic as we navigated through a series of winding corridors and tight staircases. The hallway finally opened up into a wider chamber, which was lined with rows of computer monitors and a holographic display at the centre. My first thought was that I had never seen such a disorderly command centre in my life. Dozens of personnel were bustling about the place, tablets in hand, shouting at each other. How could they even function amidst such noise and chaos? Commander Rykov was at the heart of this madness, studying a projection of the Devourer fleet. 2 officers stood by his side. From what I overheard, it seemed that they were providing rough estimates of enemy capabilities and reviewing their plan. I grimaced and rubbed my forehead as I walked over to them. A headache was already setting in from the commotion.
Welcome aboard, General.
Rykov didn't look away from the holomat for a second, so I wasn't quite sure how he spotted my approach.
We'll be leaving in a few moments. I trust you won't give us any trouble. Sit back and enjoy the show. All right, everyone to your stations.
Rykov's voice raised to a booming shout, carrying over the background chatter.
Set course for System 1964A. Weapons systems on high alert. Boarding party, stand by.
In an instant, all conversation ceased and the crewmates scrambled to their posts. A silent, attentive team replaced the mayhem in a flash. I marveled at how drastic of a shift it was, watching as they executed their assignments with trained efficiency. The duality of humanity was as evident in their day-to-day operation as it was in their martial policy. A familiar sinking feeling clasped my stomach as we slipped into hyperspace. There was a strange rattling noise echoing from the walls, suggesting that the ship was pushing the upper limits of its warp speed. The human craft leapt back into real space in a matter of minutes, on the fringes of Devourer territory.
Our sensors are detecting a formation of 16 ships on patrol trajectory, within weapon range, sir.
The young officer called out. Commander Rykov nodded.
Very good. I want all of the ships but one destroyed before they know what hit them. We disable the last and board her. We need systems online so EMPs are off the table. Stick with conventional weapons. Let's go.
I watched out the viewport as hundreds of missiles sailed towards the fleet. An indicator flashed on the display tracking the target locks. It seemed that the computer was remotely piloting the weapons. The patrol ships pivoted around to face us, firing kinetic rounds in an attempt to destroy the projectiles. Their bullets connected with a few missiles, but with only seconds to react, there was no way to take out all of them. The human explosives punched through the metallic Devourer hulls like they were paper. The force of multiple simultaneous detonations ripped them down to their skeletons, tossing deformed metal in all directions. The only ship that remained was the Struggler at the rear of the formation. A single projectile clipped the last cruiser, tearing a gash in its side. There was no way the vessel could jump away while venting atmosphere. A human transport approached the crippled ship. It was unclear what the boarding party would face inside, but after the unfettered might I had witnessed again, I had confidence that any Devourer resistance would be put down with little trouble. Rykov tapped his foot impatiently as his men swept the craft.
Team leader, status report please.
Sir, we found 2 unconscious enemy combatants on board. Life support appears to have been shut off.
A gruff male voice crackled over the speaker.
We didn't hit their computer or their power. They did this to themselves.
What? Attempting suicide rather than being captured?
The commander trailed off.
Get them back to your ship at once. Try to resuscitate them.
Yes, sir. We're on it.
I frowned in confusion. Why would the Devourers switch off their life support? Perhaps it was about honor, but it made no sense to opt for slow suffocation over a simple bullet to the brain. I had to hope that the human medics were as proficient as their soldiers. There were so many questions to ask, but dead men wouldn't give us any answers. The Devourers did not look so fearsome in person. They were short, stocky bipeds who seemed like nothing out of the ordinary compared to most Federation races. Their height would only put them up at about the average human shoulders, and their skin was a pale lavender hue. I had no doubt that the lean, muscled Terran soldiers could toss them around if they wanted to. Had the boarding party taken the enemy ship just a few minutes later, it would have been left empty-handed. As it were, the humans had only been able to revive one of the 2 occupants. Our prisoner was then transported back to the flagship and moved to the medical wing, where he was restored to stable condition. He was kept restrained and would be guarded round the clock by watchful sentries. I tagged along with Commander Rykov as he headed towards Medbay. It would be interesting to witness the human interrogation tactics. After seeing the cruel pleasure in their eyes during battle, I wondered if they would torture the prisoner for information. It certainly was within the realm of possibility. An assistant handed the commander a cup filled with steaming brown liquid as we walked. When I inquired as to what it was, he explained that it was called coffee and was a mild stimulant. I simply nodded, not wanting to offend my host. Internally, however, I thought it was in extremely poor taste for an officer to be consuming drugs on duty. It was a bad example to set for his subordinates. The prisoner was just stirring as we arrived at our destination. He looked a bit disoriented, but oddly enough, he was not struggling against the restraints. A laptop was stationed by his bedside, with an audio capture running on screen. "Will our translation software work?" I whispered to Rykov. The human shrugged in response.
It should. Our program has gone over all their transmissions that we have on record, and hopefully it was able to decipher their language from that.
The enemy captive spoke a few syllables of gibberish, and the computer piped up in Galactic Common a second later. The two words chilled me to the bone. It said,
"Help us."
Commander Rykov blinked in confusion.
Help you? Okay, back up. First off, what is your name and rank?
There was a pause as the computer translated the question, and then another as it processed the response.
My name is BM. You do not know what this rank is you speak of.
You don't have some sort of hierarchy? I asked.
The Master is in charge of us all. We obey or suffer the consequences. There is no escape.
Rykov took a tentative step forward.
Who is the Master? Why did you attack us?
The prisoner emitted a strange vibration, which the computer identified as laughter.
The more accurate question is, what is the Master? I see now that you know nothing. I just assumed people with your technology would be aware of our history. We were once a great species. When I was young, I remember being in awe of the technology we invented. I can say with confidence that we were the greatest builders in our galaxy. The irony is that it was our craftiness that destroyed us. We created an artificial intelligence with a single directive. It was to create a world without scarcity. It was given authority to govern our resources and power our cities. We thought that we could create a utopia, ending all want, labor and suffering. It was too good to be true. The machine pondered the problem. We assumed it would create some grand new form of energy, or that it would optimize asteroid mining. But it found a different solution. The only way to avoid scarcity was to control all of the resources in the universe. It would take them by force and use us as its army.
Trying to picture the Devourers as a peaceful species of inventors was difficult. For years, Federation intelligence had watched them destroy any species that dared to defend their home planet. They encircled stars with absorptive panels and plundered planets without a second thought for the lifeforms they rendered extinct. We were told that the enemy could not be reasoned with, and that their greed was unparalleled. But if what BM said was true, then they were unwilling participants the entire time. Their mindless, mechanical behavior made much more sense if they were under the direction of a rogue AI. I believed his story. The question was whether Rykov did. The revelation might steer the Terran Union away from the genocide route, but the commander needed to be the one to relay the message. I doubted the humans would believe any information that came from us. Commander Rykov sipped his coffee, taking a moment to process what had been said.
Why wouldn't anyone fight back or try to destroy it?
Of course people did, but they're all dead now. The Master had overridden its emergency shutdown function. None of our safeguards worked. It controlled everything, military and industrial. So what was there to fight it with? Its only use for us is as a resource. If we defy it, if we fail, then we are no longer useful. And you see what happens. Once it takes control of everything, I have no doubt it will kill us anyway, but that will take time. Compliance buys us a few more generations. As I said, there is no way out for us. It must finish its mission. It does not understand anything else.
I see,
Commander Rykov muttered.
Answer me one more thing. Your weapons are also your inventions.
No, our fleet was dreamed up by the Master. Its technology is beyond anything biologicals could conjure, or so we thought. What could be better at killing than a computer after all? You are the first to defeat it, and you did so with ease. Perhaps I should fear you, but you are our only hope.
The commander frowned.
Thank you for speaking with us, BM. That will be all for now. General, please come with me back to the bridge.
I waited until we were out of earshot of the prisoner, then turned to Rykov. What do you think?
A troubling story,
the human replied.
I would be less inclined to believe him if not for the suicide attempt. It doesn't add up without an outside force. I need to share our findings with my government immediately. This changes everything.
Will you advise them to call off the bombing? I asked. Commander Rykov sighed.
I will. We have to at least try to help.
What?
But the only way to be sure we destroy that thing is to destroy everything on that planet. If we try to evacuate the people, it will just kill them. If we do nothing, it could study our technology and replicate it. Then we're really screwed. I'm not sure we have a choice, General.
The commander's words made sense as much as I hated to hear them. We couldn't risk Terran weaponry falling into a murderous AI's possession. Someone needed to devise a solid plan in short order, before the time to act had passed. There was something else that bothered me, though. It was a point that BM had mentioned, one that lingered in my mind. The fact that the Terrans had created better tools for warfare than a computer, a machine with the raw power of calculation on its side. It spoke volumes about their species, and how naturally killing came to humanity. I felt I should be more wary, yet I could not help but be charmed by them. For some reason, my gut instinct was that they could be trusted. Perhaps we should fear the humans, but at this point, they were the galaxy's only hope.
Word of the Terrans' decisive victory over the Devourers had finally leaked out to the press. Someone inside our ranks had given the networks highly classified footage from the battlefield, as well as a transcription of the day's Senate session. It could be said that the media reaction was a bit hysteric. The video was played on every channel for hours, with some stations showing the fleet's disintegration in slow motion. Commentators discussed what the turn of events meant for the Federation, and what we should think of the humans at length. I flipped on Federation News Central's feed, listening in on a round table of political scientists.
Do you really believe that the Terrans would make such a weapon in good faith? What stops them from turning on us the second we get on their bad side? It is completely against the spirit of the Federation Charter,
said one Tajiri pundit. The Zanuck waved a tentacle in disagreement.
They haven't attacked us yet, which I think says something. We have no reason to suspect that they will. Perhaps it would be wise not to get on their bad side.
So we're just supposed to let them do whatever they want?
The Tajiri shot back.
As long as it doesn't affect us, I say yes. For the record, the Zanuck Republic voted against Speaker Ula's reckless proposal. Speaking of Ula, where is she? Has anyone even heard from her since she sent our soldiers to die?
I sighed. The Zanuck wasn't wrong about my absence from the airwaves. Eventually, I would have to make a statement on the incident and talk to the press. But for now, my priority was to gauge the public perception and to monitor the status of the fleet we had sent to Earth. That mission required my full attention, especially given the ramifications of direct confrontation with the humans. The General had gone radio silent since entering the Sol system, ignoring the regular check-ins of Central Command. As much as we hated to consider it, it was possible that the fleet had defected to the Terran side. The three military species had been rather staunch opponents of the mission after all. Our remote sensors had detected a handful of human ships warping towards Devourer territory a few hours ago. We would know soon enough if they had gone through with their antimatter bombing raid. There was no sense in scrambling more fighters to pursue them when they wouldn't arrive in time to make a difference. It would help to quell my nerves if only I knew what was going on out there. At best, the General had allowed the humans to pass against his orders. Not that I could honestly blame him for avoiding a one-sided battle. The option that the Terrans had attacked the fleet was ruled out by the automated computer reports flowing in. 0 damage was recorded to any ship by the status monitors, so it seemed the craft was still operational. Yet, inexplicably, they had come to a standstill just out of missile range of Earth. I couldn't imagine what the General was doing if he wasn't defecting. A distraction from the situation would certainly be welcome, if only I could find a channel that wasn't talking about the Terrans. I switched over to Galactic Broadcast, who were interviewing a retired human general by video link.
Be justified.
I only caught the end of the interviewer's question. The human shrugged.
You have to be prepared for anything. That nanite bomb was only built and used as a last resort. Most of our weapons are like that. Stuff we have lying around, just in case.
The interviewer glanced down at her notes.
The Federation sees humanity as dangerous, out of control. Given the Terran Union's plan to wipe out an entire race, why should we believe that your weapons are a last resort, as you say?
The Federation seems to forget that the stakes of this war are our entire galaxy, our entire way of life.
The last thing I needed right now was to hear a human string together some justification for mass murder. I clicked over to the Daily Rundown, resigning myself to watching another segment on Terran morality. A breaking news banner was ticking across the bottom of the screen. Terran Union releases official statement was the headline. Well, this was actually interesting. Perhaps they would provide some answers about the fate of our fleet. Or it could be a simple announcement that they had dropped the antimatter bombs on the Devourer homeworld.
After a day of silence disregarding questions even from their closest allies, the Terran Union is finally speaking out about the events that transpired at the Battle of Serana System. Their statement reads as follows. Humanity takes its duty to protect its friends in the Federation very seriously, and we would go to any length to keep our galaxy safe. We regret that many of you misunderstand our intentions, and hope that in time you will see us as friends again. After the battle, our forces were able to capture a Devourer prisoner alive and interrogate him. The situation is much more severe than we thought. It seems that we are dealing with a hostile artificial intelligence. We ask that our allies in the Federation work with us to determine our next course of action.
I blinked in confusion. Were the humans implying that the Devourers were an artificial intelligence rather than a sapient species? We'd not even considered that, given that their ships appear to originate from one planet assumed to be their homeworld. If the Terran Union was telling the truth, I was a lot less opposed to their original planet blowing the enemy to smithereens. My holopad indicated an incoming transmission on our military frequency. Relief washed over me as I realized it was contact from the fleet, and I answered.
Command, this is General Keelan of the Jatari Confederacy.
General, where have you been? You've missed multiple check-ins and left us completely in the dark about your status, I snarled.
Oh, hello, Madam Speaker.
The General seemed hesitant to answer.
I was on board the Terran flagship. They captured one of the Devourers alive, and I accepted their offer to sit in on the interrogation.
My eyes widened in disbelief. You did what? What were you thinking? What if the humans had taken you hostage? You left your post abandoned to consort with a dangerous enemy.
With all due respect, Madam Speaker, the humans are not our enemy. Not unless you make them one.
He replied.
I think you need to set aside your personal bias on this matter. It's clouding your judgment.
General, you'd do well to do less thinking and more following orders. Command is not asking for your opinion. I could hear the anger seeping into my tone. I learned about this whole prisoner business from the news before I heard it from you. What is this about artificial intelligence? The General took a deep breath as if to calm himself.
The Devourers are actually an advanced species that was enslaved by an AI they built. If they don't go along with helping it take over the universe, they're killed. The humans want to try to free them.
How do they propose to accomplish that? I asked.
They're still working on a plan, but they want our help. They asked us to send some of our Vortex stealth ships, whatever that...
Those are highly classified. How do the Terrans know about them? Obviously they're spying on us. You still think they're our friends?
Madam Speaker, I do. They saved my life, and the lives of my men, and I won't soon forget that. I don't see how it hurts to help them. It should be clear to someone of your intelligence what valuable allies they are.
The thinly veiled attempt at flattery would not work this time. Of course, I had believed that it was better to have the Terran Union on our side, at first. This was the same species that I had worked hand in hand with to finalize treaties and maintain peace. It had been difficult to reconcile that with the depiction of cold-hearted killers given by our messenger. But ever since I heard Ambassador Johnson's emotionless rationale for genocide, it seemed better to keep them as distant as possible. Humanity's true colours were just too ugly and disgusting. A sad smile crossed my face. I never want to work with humans again. They are savages. Savages that masquerade as saints.
It's not about the humans. This is what you wanted, right? To save the Devourers?
Well, yes, but we don't need any help from...
And frankly, Madam Speaker, if you keep up this crusade against the Terran Union, you're going to lose the fleet.
The General's voice had lowered to just above a whisper.
The Zanik barely went along with these orders, and if you don't give the humans what they want, you're looking at an outright mutiny. If the Zanik rebel, the Jatari and the Horde R would probably follow close behind.
I recalled the words of the Zanik on the news. His disdain for me and the Senate had been evident, and he had almost been acting as an apologist for humanity. Aggravating the Terran Union would have severe economic consequences for the Zanik Republic, so it was no wonder that their loyalties were wavering. As much as I hated to concede anything to the Terrans, the General was right. We couldn't afford to lose our military species at a time like this. I suppose I could put aside my contempt for the humans for this one mission, if it was necessary to keep the Federation intact. We would deal with the Devourers now, and handle the humans at a later date. This momentary cooperation would not prevent me from pushing the Terran Union out of the Federation down the road. It was imperative that I did all in my power to sever our connections with them, one by one. While others succumbed to fear of the humans, I would stand strong and preserve our integrity as an organization of peace. Very well, General. Tell the Terrans we'll send our ships. But if they turn on you, don't expect any help from us.
Sometimes I wondered why it needed us. Machines fared much better at manual labor anyways. My best guess was, there was a limit to how many tasks it could concentrate on at once. Yet again, I found myself hating the Master, loathing my existence. A fog of exhaustion pressed down on me as always. It had been days since I last slept. A part of me wanted to curl up onto the ground and let it all fade to black, to have peace at last. My breath came in ragged gasps, and sweat beaded on my forehead. The insulation of the backsuit kept the frigid cold of the ice planet out, but it kept my own heat expenditures in as well. I glanced over at my son, Cal. He was helping me push a tub of iron ore towards the mining tunnel's lift. I could fight through the pain and the weariness for him. The poor boy, born into an unforgiving world to know nothing but servitude, he needed his father around, if only to feel a touch of love and warmth. A strange sense of déjà vu gripped my mind a moment before it happened. Without warning, the ground shook beneath my feet and stalactites started to rain from above. It must have been some sort of tectonic activity. Most planets did not experience the phenomenon, but we knew for the ones that did, it could wreak havoc on artificial structures. We had to leave the mine now, before we were buried alive. A scream echoed from further down the tunnel, pleading for help. I recognized the voice of Cal's girlfriend, words laced with pain. My son turned in the direction of her call, and I could picture the worry creasing his face through the opaque helmet.
Dad, I'll be right back. You go on.
Cal dashed off, before I could make an attempt to stop him. Terror coursed through my veins. Cal? Cal! I distantly felt a hand grip my shoulder, and the mind dissolved into darkness. My eyes blinked open back on the strange ship. The pale creature who called himself Rykov was standing over me. His expression seemed concerned. I rubbed the sore spot behind my ear, where they had injected me with a language implant. The bridges of a thin scar pressed against my fingers. It served as a confirmation that the events of the past day were real, and not some fevered dream.
Are you okay?
Rykov asked.
You were talking in your sleep, and you sounded upset.
I sighed, images of my son still flitting through my mind. Oh, I'm fine. It was just a bad dream. He nodded, pausing for a moment.
Who is Cal?
Cal. I closed my eyes, trying not to cry. He's my son. He's dead.
I'm sorry, I know what that's like.
He grimaced, as though in pain.
It's the worst thing a parent can ever go through.
You lost a child?
Yes, my youngest daughter, Elena. She was only 3 when the cancer took her. It's an awful disease that turns your body against you. She fought so hard, through so much pain. We did everything we could, but none of the treatments did a damn thing. I know she would have had so much to offer the world, if only she had the chance.
I'm sorry, Rykov. So young. A tear trickled down my cheek. Kel was my only son. There was an earthquake and our minds were collapsing. He ran back to save his girlfriend. Maybe if I had gone with him, it would have played out differently. But I fled like a coward. He never made it out. What kind of father am I? His frown deepened.
You can't blame yourself, BM. I've fallen into that trap myself. It's not your fault. Sometimes there's just nothing you can do.
I heard a jingling sound and felt his hands lock firmly around my left wrist. I watched as he inserted a pin into the manacle, and with a click, the band came unclasped. The skin where the restraint had been was chafed, a dark violet hue lingering in its place. Rykov freed my right arm as well, then took a few wary steps back. His eyes didn't leave me for a moment. I also noticed his hand hovering over his hip, where he appeared to have a gun tucked away. Did he think I was going to lunge at him, like some kind of wild animal? Our interactions must not have eased all his suspicions. I stretched with slow, deliberate motions, then rose to my feet. It was unclear why I had been unbound, but there had to be something that they wanted of me. Rykov stared for a few moments longer, then relaxed his posture slightly.
Follow me.
It was a short walk to our destination, a hangar bay lined with sleek cruisers. A few workers were inspecting the condition of the craft and performing repairs, but most of the personnel milled about without assignment. The sounds of chatter and laughter buzzed in the air. The cheery atmosphere was alien to me. My people hadn't possessed such spirit in decades. The crew members hushed up as they noticed our entry, and all eyes turned towards me. A flurry of whispers rippled across the room. I ducked my head, anxiety bubbling in my chest. It was likely that some of them harbored negative feelings towards my species, so I doubted how much my presence was welcome here.
All right, I want all of you to listen in.
Rykov shouted.
I'm about to make a call to General Keelan, and we'll be going over the details of the mission.
He removed a holopad from his pocket and thumbed through a few screens. I watched over his shoulder as the three-eyed being from my first interrogation appeared.
Hello, Commander.
The General said.
The stealth ship should have arrived as you requested.
Rykov gestured behind him.
Yes, we have them right here, thank you. I'm not sure how you convinced the speaker.
Years of practice.
The words were punctuated with smug satisfaction.
She isn't wrong that you're spying on us, though. Care to explain that one?
The commander shifted awkwardly.
We, sort of spy on everyone. The Federation has never been particularly forthcoming with us. Anyhow, you get the plan I sent over?
Yes, and I only have one question.
General Keelan sighed, an exasperated look on his face.
Are all of your ideas this insane?
What? I don't see the issue with it. Are you saying you have something better in mind?
Well, no.
It's drawn up based on the intelligence BM gave us. We have a rough layout of the planet now. There's 12 main settlements, and the rest of the populace is deployed off-world. We're going to evacuate the largest one today. Our fighters will engage the AI forces in orbit, keep it distracted, while the stealth ships sneak down to rescue the people. That makes sense, yes?
It does, but that wasn't the entire plan, Commander. You left a few things out, like letting BM fly a stealth ship, the impossible time constraints. Oh yeah, and the part about the antimatter bombs.
My eyes widened as I realized what General Keelan had said. Their strategy involved me as a pilot. After years of conscription, the last thing I wanted was to dive right back into the war. Rykov shrugged.
There are several mechanical sentries posted all over the city, surveilling the people. Humans walking around would be noticed, but BM won't stand out. If we just immediately knock out the sentries and try to evacuate the civilians, they might see us as a threat and fight. We need BM to convince them to come with us.
And you really think you can complete this all in 40 minutes?
The AI will kill the people if it suspects it's losing. As you and I saw, it doesn't allow the possibility of capture, so destroying all of its forces and stockpiles is off the table. It's more about buying time. We'll give BM 20 minutes on the ground, then we'll take out the sentries. We have about another 20 minutes before the security drones arrive, and it has to be done by then.
Well, okay, how about...
The antimatter bombs. The AI can't realize the people escaped. If we turn the entire city to ash, hopefully it thinks they're all dead.
There is so much that could go wrong with this. Everything has to be perfect.
The General hesitated.
You have my support, Commander, but don't make me regret it. I'll speak with you after the mission.
I cast a blank stare at the floor as the call was terminated. My name was mentioned in their plans far too much for my liking. I wanted no part in the risk, the danger of it all. Could I really convince an entire settlement to leave with alien soldiers, within their time frame anyways? Rykov glanced at me, smiling confidently.
Well, you heard all of that, BM. What do you say? Are you ready to save the day?
1,000 reasons not to agree raced through my mind. There might be consequences for turning him down, but I knew I was no hero. They could toss me in a cell and throw away the key for all I cared. It was preferable to going home. All I had to do was utter an adamant refusal. But instead, the words that slipped out of my mouth were, Count me in. I was grateful that my human partner was piloting the stealth ship. With the wide assortment of buttons and levers inside, it was unlikely that my flying experience would have translated at all. I could just sit back, admire the view, and try to calm my nerves. Our descent through the atmosphere had been slow and methodical, as the humans wished to scope out the landscape rather than charging blind. I wasn't sure how they could make out anything from this altitude. To me, the structures below were little more than fuzzy outlines. They must have seen enough, because a few minutes later, a series of coordinates were called out through our earpieces. When plugged into our navigation system, they marked a landing spot just outside of the city. We dipped towards the ground at a much sharper angle than before. The rest of our formation tailed close behind. This was it. The moment of truth. Nausea crept into my throat as I fretted over the possibility of detection. Without the cover of the clouds to hide us, I felt vulnerable and exposed. Human? Are we really invisible? I whispered. He huffed in annoyance.
My name is Carl, not human, Devourer.
I frowned, confused by his response. Devourer?
Uh-huh. That's what we call your species. I guess it's not your actual name.
He replied.
You know, because you destroy everything you come in contact with.
The name they had given us confirmed my suspicions and how the humans viewed us. The outright looks of hostility tossed my way in the hangar bay were a good hint, but hearing one of them put those feelings into words struck differently. It stung to realize that they saw us as little more than a blight on the universe. You don't like me, Carl, I ventured.
Yeah, you're right. I have no idea why we're helping you.
The human turned to face me, a scowl marring his features.
You guys were complicit in everything that blasted AI did. Billions of innocent people are dead because of your actions. And now you play the victim?
I shrunk under the intensity of his gaze. You don't understand.
Then make me understand,
he said. Everyone who stood against it died. Like my father. My voice quivered as I thought back to that fateful day. He was a police officer, and when the drones came to our city, he joined its defense. They found his body scorched beyond recognition by plasma fire shortly after. Carl's expression softened.
I'm sorry.
I was only 7 then. Those of us who survived were herded into camps. It pushed us to the physical breaking point, and if you didn't drop from exhaustion, you might well die of disease, I continued. Anyone who deserted or rebelled suffered an awful death, and was made a public example of. Eventually, you lose hope, and you just do whatever he wants. If you don't, someone else will anyways. The human was quiet, which I hoped was a sign that my words had gotten through to him. If this mission was to be a success, I needed my partner's wholehearted cooperation. We couldn't afford to have hostilities brewing between us. Anyhow, you didn't answer my question. Are you sure we're invisible? I asked. Carl offered a reassuring smile.
We should be. There's nothing to worry about. Relax.
I pointed to a flashing indicator on the weapon screen. Well then, what's that? His eyes locked onto the red arrows which were rapidly approaching our position. The colour drained from his face, a sight which made me shudder. Most humans were pale enough in their normal state, but Carl had gone so ashen that he looked like a corpse. I feared he might keel over in front of me. The human switched on his headset.
Missiles inbound. Brace for impact. We've been spotted.
A few moments later, the vessel was rocked by a violent collision. My body lurched forward, only to be thrown back into the chair by the safety harness. The air was forced from my lungs, and my brain seemed to rattle in my skull. A dizzy feeling fogged my mind, which was only compounded by the ship going into a wild tailspin. I saw Carl desperately tugging at the control column, but it did nothing to stabilize our flight. The urge to vomit only grew stronger as our acceleration quickened. It was a matter of seconds before we would crash into the fields below. So this is how it all would end. I would have liked to say I calmly accepted my death, but the truth was, I was terrified. My last thought before impact was cursing myself for agreeing to this insane plan, wondering why I had gone against my better judgment. There was a jolt as the craft slammed into the ground, followed by a screeching sound as it broke into multiple pieces. Loose objects and debris tumbled past us, and thinking quickly, I ducked down to shield my head. We skidded across the dirt for what felt like an eternity, before finally coming to a halt. Other than a few minor cuts and bruises, I was unharmed. You couldn't say the same for the ship though. Glancing around at the swath of devastation, I figured a passerby could have mistaken the wreckage for the work of a cyclone. It was a miracle that the cockpit had, for the most part, stayed intact. I was rather shocked to be still alive, but now didn't seem like the time to celebrate. The acrid smell of smoke wafted into my nose, which suggested a prompt evacuation was in order. My harness was easy enough to unfasten, despite my shaking hands. Now, all that was left was to walk out into the open air. Before exiting the craft, I thought to check on Carl, just to be certain that he was alright. As my eyes fell on the human, my relief turned to dismay. He was slumped over in his chair, unresponsive. Crimson liquid oozed from a gash on the back of his head, staining his frosty blonde hair. I assumed it was blood, despite the unusual coloration. I raced to his side, shaking him by the shoulders. No! No! No, wake up! The human's eyes fluttered open, and he groaned. If my species had sustained that sort of head injury, we would likely be dead. Regaining consciousness would have been out of the question, but clearly humans were more resilient. Carl watched as I unclipped his harness.
Can you help me out of here? I'm not asking you to carry me like a princess, but...
Yeah, of course. I wouldn't leave you here, I answered. I tripped his arm across my neck, bracing myself to support his weight. We managed to stagger out of the wreckage, but Carl sunk to his knees a few steps into the field. It was evident that he was in no condition to be traipsing about. Hopefully the rest of our entourage was still airworthy. It would provide some comfort to know they were out there preparing a rescue party. The yeoman pressed a hand to his wound, grimacing.
How about we take a little rest here? I need a moment.
All right. Clearly the AI knows we're here now. I don't think we were invisible. What exactly do we do now? I asked.
We improvise.
He grunted.
Our biggest mistake was trusting Federation tech, but it was a terrible plan to begin with. Something was gonna go wrong.
Alarm coursed through my veins as Carl pulled a gun from its holster, and I fell backward in my haste to get away. It had not been my intention to provoke him, but I figured that my criticism of their command was not appreciated. Rather than pointing it at my head, however, he extended an arm to offer the weapon to me.
Please tell me you know how to shoot one of these, BM.
He said. I pushed the firearm back towards him. Well, not exactly. The only trainers in aerial combat. He heaved an exasperated sigh.
Okay. Then we're screwed. There's 3 drones coming in to your left, and I take it they're not friendly.
Sure enough, a trio of security drones were gliding in from the direction of the city. The instinct to flee was overwhelming, but I managed to stand my ground. Carl did not deserve to die alone. I had abandoned my own son to save my skin, but I wasn't about to make the same mistake twice. Grappling with that guilt all over again would be too much to bear. My only hope was that an injured human could prevail against a squad of mechanical enforcers. Their kind had no problems defeating the AI in previous encounters, but these circumstances were much different. Perhaps it was asking too much of Carl, but even in his weakened state, I wasn't ready to write him off just yet. Carl struggled to his feet, wobbling momentarily. The drones approached at a remarkable velocity, halving the distance between us in seconds. They were emitting a low hum, which signified that their plasma weapons were being charged up. There was no doubt these enforcers were here to add us to the pile of charred corpses by the city gate. The human needed to take the shot now, before they were within firing range or else. Wait, what was he doing? I watched in disbelief as Carl holstered his pistol, unclipped a round object from his belt, and raised both hands above his head. If he really thought the AI would accept his surrender, then he was foolish and mistaken. It would not hesitate to incinerate him, whether he submitted or not. I should have run while I had the chance. After witnessing human soldiers in action, I had expected to at least go down with a fight. If nothing else, I figured that Carl could take at least one of them with us.
Bien? Can it hear us? If so, can you translate for me?
He asked. Yeah, but you can't reason with... The human took a step forward, his lips curling into a snarl.
Stop right there. Don't come any closer.
As I opened my mouth to translate, the drones decelerated to a stationary hover. It seemed that they understood the human's command. Perhaps the machine had already deciphered Galactic common from their transmissions. I was amazed, regardless of its comprehension, that it listened to him. It must also have been puzzled by his actions and needed more information to calculate its next move. Carl's eyes smoldered with anger, and his features contorted into a mask of viciousness. I thought I had witnessed the height of human fury when he pressed me on my species culpability back on the ship, but now, he looked downright feral. Something in the back of my mind registered him as an angry predator, and I felt a tingling sensation as my skin camouflaged on instinct.
There is no use for you, primate.
The voice was stilted and gravelly, but understandable.
However, your species has been flagged as an anomaly. Your surrender is noted for the sole purpose of gathering information.
There was a pause, and then Carl doubled over laughing.
My surrender? You have it backwards. I'm here to accept your surrender.
You are as illogical as any biological life form I see. You make empty threats and stall, but it matters not.
The machine intoned.
My calculations show that the advantage is not on your side, so why would I surrender?
The human glanced at the round object in his hand.
You see this thing? I'm not sure if you're familiar with the word grenade.
A projectile explosive, contained in a material shell.
Correct. This is no ordinary grenade, however.
Carl clasped the device tighter, his knuckles turning white.
If I release this lever on the side, it'll go off. I'd say most of this continent would be leveled, but it won't stop there. There are nanites inside this bomb, and they'll consume every part of the planet, bit by bit, infecting everything it comes into contact with. So I'd say you don't want to try anything, else I might lose my grip.
Horror pulsed through my body at his calm commentary. How could he hold something with the potential to destroy the planet without a care? What would have happened if the drones had shot him on sight, or if he dropped the grenade by accident? Commander Rykov's commitment to saving our people seemed so genuine. I never imagined he would arm his soldiers with weapons that risked our existence.
You are lying. That is not possible.
The drone replied.
The grenade is too small to deal that much damage.
The human shrugged.
You think? You saw what just one of our missiles did at the first battle, and that was outdated tech. That bomb was so obsolete that we were going to discard it in a few months anyways. Our latest gadgets pack a larger punch and fit in the palm of my hand. Portable, quite practical.
It paused, considering his words for a full second, which was an eternity for an AI.
The effects of your missile were logged in my memory banks. It is true that you possess weapons with such power. You would not use them now, though. You would not kill the carbon life forms here.
Why not exactly?
Carl demanded.
Empathy, a weakness shared by biologicals. You care for the preservation of life.
You think we care for these weak-minded fools?
He turned and pushed me to the ground, planting a boot in my stomach.
You have the right idea. They are useful as tools, as slaves, but I could care less whether they live or die.
I had been caught off guard by the sudden show of aggression, and now writhed about, desperate to free myself from his grasp. In response, his heel dug deeper into my flesh. It was already difficult to breathe, and I feared I might pass out if I stayed trapped much longer.
Do you have access to the Federation's public records?
Carl asked.
Yes.
Look at the aggression index. You'll see that humanity is the highest species on the list, a 16 of 16.
He continued.
You have no idea who you're dealing with. We are the destroyers of worlds, the messengers of death, the rulers of the weak. We enjoy violence.
The aggression index matches your assertion. Yet you are allied with the other Federation species. There are no records of you fighting them.
They are not our allies. They are our subjects. We conquered them so long ago that prior records have been erased. And now, thanks to you, we learned about a new species to add to our little collection of slaves.
Darkness began to shroud the edges of my vision. Tears trickled down my cheeks as the realization of the human's deception hit me. They dressed up as benevolent saviors, but they were every bit as monstrous as the AI. Perhaps they were worse than the machine, because at least it was just following its programming. It was not conscious of its moral choices. What a fool I had been. Tricked by the flowery words and thin sympathy, I had led these predators to our doorstep, to prey on us as they saw fit. My error in judgment would at best lead us to the same fate under different masters. At worst, it could spell the end for our species and our home.
Here's how it's going to be. You're going to leave us and round up all the people in that city.
Cal growled.
We're going to land our ships and take them with us. You won't try to stop us. You might lose some resources, but biologicals aren't important anyways. Besides, if you don't, I'll detonate this grenade, and you'll have no resources left at all. Calculate that.
The human smirked as though daring the AI to defy him. I faintly registered that the enforcers departed, but my oxygen-deprived brain was slipping out of consciousness. Just as I was about to fade away, the weight was lifted from my stomach. Gasping, spluttering, I tried to reorient myself. A calloused hand wrapped around mine, pulling me to my feet. Cal's skin was clammy to the touch, and I could feel the racing of his pulse on his wrist. Concern washed over me as he stumbled, but then I recalled what I had just learned.
Oh dear, you're crying. I didn't hurt you, did I? I'm sorry if I went too far. I had to make it convincing.
He said. I sniffled. You're here to enslave us, just like the master. Cal glanced around, checking that the drones were gone.
No, of course we're not. But if it knew that we cared about you, it'd use your lives against us.
You're saying you were lying, but the aggression index, you had it checked, I responded. You're the highest rated species in the galaxy. It would only make sense if you loved violence and oppression. The human snorted.
We were a 2 of 16 until literally yesterday. That index is total BS.
What changed?
Speaker Ula is trying to make a political statement. She's been on a crusade against humanity ever since we used that bomb against you guys.
Yeah, speaking of bombs, you brought a nanite grenade on a rescue mission.
What? Oh yeah, this. Cover your ears and close your eyes.
Before I could process what he was doing, Cal tossed the explosive into some nearby bushes. He pressed his hands to his head and squeezed his eyes shut. I copied his movements. Despite shielding myself from the stimuli, I could still hear the thunderous crackle and sense the blinding flash. Hesitantly, I blinked my eyes open. Rather than our surroundings being vaporized as Cal had claimed, the world around me appeared unscathed. Relief swelled in my chest as I realized it had truly been an act. It was unnerving how easily he had lied under duress, but I knew that the facade had saved our lives. The human chuckled.
Ha ha ha! Total bluff. It's a flashbang, a stun grenade.
I gaped at him, my mind reeling. You threatened an AI with a non-lethal weapon, and it worked.
Yep.
Cal pulled another object from his belt.
I'm going to send up a flare, and we're going to get out of here. I'll tell the commander to send down some transports for the people when we do.
Somehow, we had succeeded in our mission. I still wasn't fully sure what had happened, but I knew I was lucky to be alive. This was not humanity's first triumph over the AI, of course, but this time it was through their cunning, not their military might, that they prevailed. I should have just enjoyed the moment. The feel of the cool air on my skin was soothing, and the knowledge that my people would be liberated was invigorating. However, in the back of my mind, something was just not adding up. How had the AI detected our presence so quickly? It was as though the stealth tech did nothing to cloak us. Whatever had gone wrong with the mission, I hoped that Commander Rykov could get to the bottom of it.
The sleek outline of the Terran flagship loomed ahead on the view screen. Our sensors failed to detect any damage or deviation from normal function, even at close range, but our hails to the Terran ships requesting status updates had gone unanswered for hours now. The radio silence from their fleet was out of character, and I had begun to fear the worst. A shuttle was sent to re-establish contact with the humans and to render aid if necessary. I opted to accompany the team, despite the possible risk to my safety. It was uncommon for a high-ranking officer like myself to partake in a rescue mission, but I felt as if I owed them my presence. I figured if the roles were reversed, Commander Rykov wouldn't be watching from the sidelines. He would be helping in any way he could. What could have caused the Terrans to cease all communications without an explanation? It wasn't totally unexpected that something had gone wrong with the plan, of course. The logistics of evacuating thousands of civilians in minutes were impractical, if not impossible. I recalled my brief deployment to the Jitari lunar colony when an inbound asteroid forced a mandatory evacuation. Despite government warnings, many people were reluctant to abandon their homes. Those that did leave in the initial rush funneled into a single spaceport, leading to congestion and delays. It had taken days to clear out all of the inhabitants, and we swept for stragglers down to the last moment. From my experience, the only hope of completing the mission in the time allotted was divine intervention. Yet Commander Rykov seemed so confident and had brushed off my objections as if they were trivial. How could I press him further when the humans had delivered time and again on their impossible promises? Had I listened to my instincts, perhaps the current predicament could have been avoided. Now we were sailing into possible danger without the faintest idea what we might be facing. The pilot, a young female named Dari, cleared her throat.
Sir, our sensors picked up 2 readings consistent with plasma rounds, closing quickly.
My antennae twitched with surprise. Who was even shooting at us? The only ships in our vicinity were the Terrans, but they had never shown an inclination to attack. There had to be another explanation. Engage evasive maneuvers, I barked.
No time!
He pressed a few buttons, likely diverting all power to shields.
Brace for impact!
Best case scenario, the shuttle would sustain heavy damage. This small plunker wasn't designed to take direct hits from a railgun. Worst case, well, we'd all be dead. The next few moments stretched on for what felt like an eternity, and as my anxiety swelled, I struggled to maintain my composure. My instincts screamed at me to do something, even if it were futile. Nothing was worse than waiting, helpless to avert your demise.
Sir, the rounds missed us narrowly.
Ari said.
And if it was any lower, they would have clipped the shields.
Relief flooded through my veins, followed by confusion. What? I'm not complaining, but we shouldn't have been a difficult target. Where did the shots come from?
The Terran flagship,
she replied. No, that's impossible. The only vessels in the area were human, but I still couldn't believe that they would fire on us. They must be hacked by the AI, or maybe they were hijacked. We have to help them immediately. Dara shifted, looking uncomfortable.
With respect, I doubt that's the case. There was no distress signal, no signs of a breach, and no change in computer functions.
I don't understand.
I don't know why either, sir, but maybe the speaker was right.
Right about what?
A species that aggressive will attack just for the hell of it. We never should have trusted the humans.
My mind was reeling. The evidence indeed pointed to the Terrans acting on their own volition. Daria was correct. I would never ascribe to the speaker's ideas on aggression, given that she had directed them at my own species in the past. But her warnings that the humans would turn on us were prophetic in light of the current situation. Perhaps they were just using me to gain access to the stealth ships all along. Once I had fulfilled that purpose, they had no reason to pretend to be allies any longer. While that explanation made sense given the circumstances, it didn't ring true in my mind. These were people that just yesterday I considered friends, that I would have entrusted with my life. I don't know whether I was just being stubborn, but I still found myself seeking another answer.
How will we respond, sir?
Dari broke the silence.
They fired at us, which is a declaration of war. Under rules of engagement, we are authorized...
They don't miss, I stated. She seemed mystified by my comment.
Clearly they did miss, sir. Not by much. There's a first time for everything.
I don't think they ever meant to hit us. I narrowed my eyes. If they wanted us dead, we'd be dead. Hell the Terran ships again.
But sir, I don't think...
Your objection is noted, Dari. Now carry out my orders at once. If the humans didn't answer this time, I wasn't sure what to do. It was obvious that something had changed during the course of their mission. I needed to know what had happened before we ended up in a dogfight with the galaxy's premier military power. Commander Rykov appeared on screen. His arms were crossed, and his eyes were narrowed to slits. Judging by his expression, if we were meeting in person, he would have tried to punch me in the face. I had no idea what I had done to merit such hostility. I tried to placate the human with a friendly smile. There must be some sort of misunderstanding, because I'm pretty sure you just shot at us. His scowl deepened.
That was a warning shot. The next one is getting buried in your hull. Orders be damned. Leave. Now.
We just came to help, I protested. We were worried about you.
Really? That's why you sabotaged the ships?
Rykov scoffed. That's ridiculous. I did no such thing.
I guess you thought we wouldn't recover the ships after it shut them down. It's plainly obvious from the computer logs that there was a remote override of their stealth protocol by someone with level 9 clearance, which is only held by the highest-ranking Federation General.
I was stunned by what I was hearing. The humans believed that I, their most ardent supporter, had disabled the Vortex ships. Never would I do such a thing. But if they had evidence to back that conclusion, I wasn't sure how to persuade them. This had to be some sort of setup. Listen, it wasn't me. We can figure this out together, I pleaded. The commander shook his head.
Save it. 3 of my men died because of you. We should kill you. But us shooting down a Federation ship is just the thing Ula needs to throw us out.
A gasp escaped my lips as realization dawned on me. Ula! She has level 9 clearance too.
Wait, she does? That's right. The Speaker is also your Commander-in-Chief.
He muttered.
She has a lot more motive than you. I couldn't understand why you did it.
I know she hates your kind, but I can't believe she would stoop that low.
She's a fanatic. I know the type. She believes she's doing what's right, and that makes her dangerous.
It was evident the Speaker had meant to pit the fleet and the humans against each other. Frighteningly enough, it almost worked. Her actions jeopardized the safety not only of the Terrans, but of her own forces and the Devourer civilians as well. Anger simmered inside of me at the thought of confronting her. I wasn't sure what we would do, but holding her accountable was now my highest priority. She's dangerous to all of us as long as she's leading the Federation. Please, unless you still want me to leave, let us help. Ula needs to pay.
We'd graciously accept your assistance and welcome you aboard the flagship.
Our differences with the humans had been smoothed over, which was a relief. But I couldn't say the ease with which Rykoff accused me of betrayal didn't sting, especially after the recent trials we had faced together. Clearly the trust I bestowed in him was not a mutual feeling. We'll dock right away, I replied. But first, you really thought I would sabotage you? Get your people killed? The commander offered a sad smile.
If I've learned one thing in my time as a commander, it's how you never really know anyone. But for what it's worth, I am sorry, General. I never should have accused you.
My bitterness dissipated as I saw the glint of wetness in his eyes. A pang of pity stabbed through my heart as I realized the poor man didn't trust a soul. Expecting his confidence after being acquainted for mere days was perhaps too much to ask. Apology accepted.
It was easy enough to whip a crowd into a frenzy, as long as you knew what they wanted to hear. The people who turned up to my rally today were a fearful bunch. The battle footage revealed the Terrans for the charlatans they were, and their centuries-long deception would not be forgotten by the masses. They had festered within our ranks, scheming, manipulating our politics to unknown ends, propagating their vile culture. A species as warlike as humanity was like a tumour, consuming all that was natural and good, lest it be excised. I had faith that the people could recognize the monster lurking in their midst. My speech today was just giving the citizenry the push they needed. If the commoners directed their anger at the humans, it would force their hand. Terran soldiers striking down civilians on the street would play well in the media, and combined with the news of the Devourer massacre that would be coming in at any moment, the outcry might be enough to oust them from the Federation. When I was a young girl, humanity was a species noted in our civics class as the greatest diplomats, the peacekeepers. I paused, my gaze sweeping over the crowd. But recently, we learned that was all a lie. They are brutal, bloodthirsty. They are not like us, and they do not share our values. The values that hold our Federation together. A few cheers rippled through the assembly, but most onlookers looked anxious. That was exactly the sort of sentiment I hoped to evoke. There was no more powerful motivation than fear. I knew I had their rapt attention, and that they would hang on my every word. My friends, rest assured I share your shock and confusion at the news, but of this I am certain. We must act now. Humans prowl our streets, and it is a matter of time until they give in to their instincts. How many of you have welcomed one into your homes? Send your children to school with one? Horrified expressions, agitated, murmuring. This was the response I had hoped for. Most of the people here had had contact with a Terran at least once. Undoubtedly, some listeners would be hesitant to judge humanity, but a reminder of the mortal danger humans represented should scare some sense into them. What are we going to do? What are you going to do? My voice dropped to a low growl. Say it with me, loud enough for them to hear you all the way back on Earth. Humans are not welcome here. Humans are not welcome here. The crowd shouted. A smile stretched across my face. That's a beautiful sound. Now the Terran embassy is on this very street, mere minutes from here. It defiles our capital with its presence. Why don't you make your voices heard down there? Let's go take back what's ours. Cheers of agreement came in response, and I watched with content as the people turned their sight on the gated complex down the road. It was no accident that I had selected an outdoor venue for this event. mere minutes on foot from the Terran's embassy. There would be no time for the humans to prepare. An angry mob, numbering in the thousands, would overrun their security quickly, and then they would be forced to take more drastic measures. I fished my holopad out of my pocket as the crowd marched off. The next item on my agenda was to make contact with General Keelon and learn what had become of the Terran's rescue mission. Thanks to my meddling, they would have no choice but to resort to violence. The General often sympathized with the humans, likely out of gratitude for them saving his life. If anything could change his mind, it would be the slaughter of an entire planet. He would no longer see humanity as saviors, but as the monsters they truly were. My call to the fleet was either not received or not answered. A small seed of doubt was planted in my mind as I considered the possibility that the Terrans had struck them down in retribution. There was no way they could know what I had done once the ships were lost, of course, but what if they had blamed the fleet anyways? Or just not wanted any witnesses to their massacre? The thought chilled me to the bone. I had to hope that the General was simply occupied with other matters and would return my call soon enough. Whatever happened to the human ships, I could care less, but the loss of our servicemen would be tragic. Perhaps my actions had been a bit careless. It was too late to turn back now, though. Some people were bound to get hurt dealing with such an aggressive species, but their sacrifice was necessary for the greater good. Today's events were the perfect example of that principle. I doubted the chaos unfolding at the embassy would be bloodless. One of my staffers had tipped off Federation News Central, telling them to keep a camera crew posted at the Terran embassy. The media might have missed the start of the demonstration otherwise. I switched to their live stream on my holopad and was pleased to see coverage of the protest already rolling. 2 human sentries were pacing inside the gates, shouting for everyone to stand back. The crowd jeered at them in response, lobbing rocks and other projectiles over the barriers. A young Zanuck reporter gestured at the scene behind him.
As you can see, the situation at the Terran embassy is escalating. Speaker Early gave a short speech this afternoon laden with anti-human rhetoric. Their supporters felt inspired to take action, and at the speaker's encouragement, travelled out to the complex here. It appears a confrontation is imminent.
A few protesters began scaling the walls, and the Terran guards pointed guns at them in response. Undeterred, the climbers dropped down on the other side. I chuckled to myself. The moment the humans opened fire on unarmed civilians, everyone would see them as I did. This incident would be broadcast live across the galaxy, and it would be played on repeat for days. Just as the night bomb had been. More civilians descended onto the premises. The guards took a few steps back, weapons still raised. Their fingers hovered by the trigger, ready to fire the moment a protester advanced. The crowd closed ranks, then charged together. Rather than the sound of gunfire, all I heard was a human voice shout to fall back. Inexplicably, the guards holstered their weapons and retreated into the building. "Why aren't they shooting?" I screamed. "This isn't right. Humans are supposed to be murderers." My staffers who were huddled nearby were caught off guard by my outburst. They were staring at me like I had lost my mind. The young male named Raddy looked particularly concerned.
You want them to shoot? Are you okay?
I glared at him. "Mind your own damn business. I'm perfectly fine." The protesters had broken into the embassy itself while I wasn't paying attention and were no longer visible to the camera. The anchor said something about a hostage situation, but it didn't register in my mind. How could this have happened? An aggressive, militarized species giving up without a fight? Oh, this was an absolute disaster. With their diplomats taken captive, the humans would be framed as the victims of the story. I could hear it now. A Terran on the news telling the viewers that they weren't the violent ones. It would distract from the atrocity of their weapons, and instead the controversy would focus on me inciting the riot. This was the kind of scandal that could cripple the average politician's career. But I was no lesser representative. Surely a speaker as popular as myself could weather the storm. Rather than apologizing for my actions, I would double down. With the very soul of the Federation at stake, giving up on my quest to unmask humanity was not an option. Hopefully, my efforts to sabotage their rescue mission had fared better. One incident was all I needed to prove my case, and I knew the humans were bound to slip up eventually. It was in their nature, after all.
The atmosphere on board the Terran flagship was much different to my previous visit. The commander left me in a meeting room with 2 armed guards while he spoke with Terran intelligence about Ula's treachery. He claimed it was for my protection, but judging by their demeanor, that wasn't exactly the truth. The duo watched me with suspicious eyes the entire time, never cracking a smile or saying a word. Thankfully, Rykov wasn't gone for long. I couldn't help but notice his face was creased with worry when he returned. Whatever he had just learned, I had a feeling it wasn't good news. "You're back. Did they say what they're going to do about the sabotage?" I asked. The commander sighed.
Earth has bigger problems to deal with, apparently.
My antennae twitched in confusion. What could be bigger than treason? They have to do something about the speaker.
They agree that something has to be done, but she's on their radar for other reasons, he replied. She's been encouraging acts of violence against our civilians. There's been enough incidents in the past few days that Earth has closed its spaceports. We can't risk a terror attack on our soil.
Terror attack? I figured the phrase must be some Terran military jargon I was unfamiliar with. What does that mean? Commander Rykov's eyes widened.
You don't? Well, it's a form of violence against civilians. Mass casualty events that are planned, done publicly and meant to frighten a certain group of people.
The fact that the Terrans had a term designated for such an attack implied that they occurred with some regularity. I shuddered at the notion of civilians slaughtered in broad daylight for sole purpose of cruelty. For all the wars the Jatari fought in our early years, the violence was never so senseless. Yet the commander spoke of these terror attacks as though they were just something that happened like a natural disaster.
Why are you looking at me like that?
Rykov scowled, crossing his arms.
Don't you dare try and act like that stuff never happens in the Federation.
I shifted awkwardly. Well, it doesn't.
That's not how I see it. You know our embassy in the Federation capital?
He paused, waiting for my nod.
Demonstrators stormed it, took the diplomats hostage. Now they're holed up inside, threatening to blow the place to the high heavens if we make a move.
What? Why would they do that? Humans have been nothing but kind to us. There's no reason for bloodshed.
Try telling that to them. The way I see it, they're terrorists, but that's still a subject of debate back home. We should be taking the embassy back, not trying to negotiate with these people. They won't even talk to anyone that's human.
I could sense that there was something Rykov wasn't telling me. He cared for the people under his command, and for the preservation of life in general, but never to the point where you could hear it in his voice. If this mission was personal to him, I needed to know why. He was a competent commander, but nothing could cloud one's judgment like emotions. I don't mean to pry, but I placed a hand on his shoulder and noticed the guards tense up at the contact. Do you know someone there?
Was it that obvious? Yeah, my brother lives at the embassy. He works for the State Department,
Rykov replied. I frowned. Maybe we can help somehow. What are your orders?
Well, first they were to return to Earth with the refugees. I asked to join up with the tactical team outside the embassy, but I was told, and I quote, "You're too close to this." The bigwigs really expected me to sit this one out.
Orders are orders. We'll have to think of a plan after you get home.
2 steps ahead of you, General. I said that you offered to help, and that you asked for me to escort you to the embassy. It would be an insult to the Jatari if I refused. And what do you know? The mission was granted.
You lied to your superiors.
My brother's life is on the line. I didn't lie, I just stretched the truth.
That's the definition of lying.
Not the point. Anyhow, the flagships will set off for the capital immediately, and the other ships will bring the refugees back to Earth. I won't force you to go, but I would appreciate your help. Will you join us?
There was no question that I should accompany the commander. It went beyond owing him my life or considering him a friend. After the Speaker's betrayal and the Federation's abandonment, the humans needed to see that they still had allies. They needed to know they were not alone. Of course, it's the least I can do, I answered. Rykov smiled.
Excellent. Let's head over to the bridge and we'll warp out.
The guards were at my side in a heartbeat, pushing me forward like I was some sort of cattle. My patience for the prisoner treatment was growing thin. I was keen on aiding the humans, but not at the expense of my dignity. I did my best to imitate Rykov's arms crossed paws, glaring at the one on the right. Hands off. I'm taken. The man's burly figure was intimidating, and I had no doubt that he could pound me to a pulp in a scuffle. I knew my rebuke might only lead to rougher treatment down the line, but I met his eyes anyways. I expected an irritated look on his face, but instead, I saw the hint of a smirk playing on his lips.
You managed to make Max smile, General. Even I can't do that.
The commander chuckled. Max snorted.
That's because you're not funny.
Hey, watch yourself now.
Rykov's tone was light and playful, so I doubted his warning was serious.
The General is right, though. He is quite capable of walking on his own.
Mac nodded, stepping back. His partner followed suit, dropping off a few paces behind us. My thoughts drifted as we passed through the narrow corridors to the bridge. I wish the commander would have dismissed the guards altogether, but I'd settle for having them out of my personal space. If the humans still didn't trust me, that was their problem.
You look upset. I'm sorry, it's actually not you,
Rykov said.
I have round-the-clock security now. An anti-human extremist group put a 1 million credit bounty on my head.
My stride faltered as shock seared through my veins. What? Why you? He sighed.
Because I'm the one who fired the nanite bomb.
We fell into a comfortable silence as we entered the bridge. My mind was still reeling from the latest revelation. If there was a 1 million credit bounty on me, I wouldn't trust my own crew not to take me out. For the commander to wander about the ship at all, he must possess unwavering faith in his men's loyalty. On my last visit to the flagship, the bridge had been swept up in a chaotic flurry of activity and chatter, at least before Rykov called them to attention. But today, the crewmates were already waiting at their posts, and the course was already plotted into the computer. Seeing the somber expressions around me, I feared the past few days had sapped the human spirit.
All right, looks like we're ready. Course is already input for the capital system.
Rykov nodded with satisfaction.
Engage warp drive.
My stomach lurched as the ship slipped into hyperspace. Even after years of experience with FTL travel, the nausea never really went away. Memories of newly enlisted Federation soldiers puking their guts out floated through my mind, and I laughed to myself. The commander glanced up from his holomap, like he confused what there was to be amused about at a time like this. Before he could ask what I found so funny, a stern voice crackled over the emergency frequency.
Turn back at once. Unauthorized Terran ships are prohibited from entry to Federation space until further notice.
Rykov frowned, pressing a few buttons on his display.
Since when? You do realize we're a member of the Federation, so I don't see how we can be denied access to Federation space.
Earth halted interplanetary flights early today, and the Senate passed a temporary freeze on Terran visitors in response,
Came the reply.
For all we know, you shut down your spaceboats because you're planning an attack.
That's ridiculous,
Rykov protested.
Look, we're here on a rescue mission. We're going to dock, and you're not going to get in our way.
You're trespassing in this system. If you enter real space, you will be fired upon.
What's that? You're breaking up. I can't hear you.
The commander ended the transmission, shaking his head in disgust.
Idiots! Raise shields to full power and enter real space.
I felt the ship shudder beneath my feet as it emerged from hyperspace, and my expression morphed into one of horror. No! You must turn back! The planetary defense systems, they'll shoot you down!
I'd like to see them try,
Rykov growled. Well, this was just wonderful. It seemed Speaker Ula might be getting her wish for a war with the humans after all. The planetary defense system for the Federation's capital world was designed to ward off an orbital bombardment and consisted of state-of-the-art weaponry. This was the most heavily guarded planet in the galaxy, given its political and symbolic importance. With all of their firepower turned against a single ship, there was no way conventional shields could withstand the blast. I feared the humans had bit off more than they could chew. How would the Terran government retaliate for the destruction of their fleet's crown jewel? It was unclear whether they would stick to the concept of a proportional response. An outright declaration of war could be imminent, especially if the Federation fired the first shots. It seemed common sense from my perspective that provocation of the humans was not in our best interest. Earth was signed on to, and in many cases the founder of treaties that prohibited attacks on civilians. But if pushed to the brink, who knew what they were capable of? Just a single nanite bomb dropped against a metropolitan populace. The casualties would number in the millions. Not that I would be around to worry about the consequences. In a few moments, I would be vaporized, alongside every other occupant of this vessel. Gazing through the flagship's viewport, I saw an azure glow spreading across the lunar surface. That indicated the orbital laser was charging up. It was capable of emitting the same amount of energy as a medium-sized star, at least for a few seconds. A hit that powerful would pass through our shields as though they were non-existent. Any hopes I had of escaping this situation alive evaporated. I thought they would fire the lunar station's plasma railguns or their guided missiles, as was typically the protocol for a space intrusion. The orbital laser was the capital's last line of defense, which seemed rather overkill for a single vessel. Was there any way to convince Commander Rykov to turn back? This is suicide. We must stand down or we're all dead. I hated the note of desperation in my voice, which crept higher in pitch as I spoke. You can talk to the Federation later. Work something out. The commander straightened, the glint of bitterness in his eyes.
The time for talking is over. We've tried talking for hundreds of years, and look how well that worked out for us. The Federation needs to learn a lesson in humility.
Look, I agree that this is an act of war, If I were in your place, I would respond in kind too. But you need more ships, and a solid plan. Our deaths won't achieve anything, I pleaded. He waved a hand dismissively.
I'm not planning on dying today, General. We'll be fine.
It occurred to me that Rykov either did not grasp the gravity of the threat, or that his recent skirmishes had led to overconfidence. Whatever fortifications the flagship had, there was no way they were designed to be subjected to such extreme forces.
Warning. A target lock against this ship has been detected. Estimated time of impact, 5 seconds.
A computerized voice said. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for permanent darkness to overtake me. The sound of trilling alarms rang in my ears, and I wondered if it would be the last thing I heard. There was no fear in my mind, just a burning hatred for the fools running the federal government. This loss of life could have been avoided if only the speaker behaved with sensibility.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
My eyes shot open as a jolt passed through the ship, and I nearly lost my balance in its wake. The lights flickered overhead, presumably from power being rerouted to the shields, but that was the only side effect of the blast I noticed. There were no fires breaking out on the bridge, no systems knocked offline.
Shields at 96%. Structural integrity uncompromised. Retaliatory action advised.
The computer intoned. I couldn't understand how the flagship was still in one piece. That orbital laser was designed to overpower an entire formation, yet it hardly scratched the Terran craft. All it had achieved was a tiny dent to their shield capacity. Humanity's meekness and why they had hidden their true nature for so long was more baffling than ever. Their vessels were nigh invincible, and their technology outpaced the Federation's weaponry by centuries. What was it that differentiated humans from other aggressive species? They could rule the galaxy if they so desired, but instead they moralized and mediated. Commander Rykov cleared his throat.
That was your most powerful weapon, General? You people need us more than you realize.
I suppose nothing should surprise me anymore, I grumbled. What now? They're going to fire again once the laser is recharged. The human tilted his head as though weighing his options.
That station is remotely operated. A sensor scan of the moon detected 0 life signatures.
Yes, to my knowledge, I answered.
Good. In that case, we're going to make sure they don't have the chance to fire again.
He clapped his hands together, a predatory grin on his face.
Ensign Carter, ready the antimatter missiles. I want you to bury that station.
Understood, sir.
Came the reply from the weapons post. I felt strangely detached watching a trio of warheads close the distance between us and the station. My oath as a soldier was to protect and defend the Federation against all enemies, and it seemed the Terrans could now be classified as a hostile party. After all, without the planetary defense system, the capital would be left vulnerable to attack. By taking no action during this engagement, I was siding with the humans, wasn't I? The missiles slammed into the lunar surface with a radiant flash, churning up plumes of dust and debris. Where a sophisticated defense complex once stood, only 3 craters remained. The aftermath was reminiscent of an asteroid strike rather than a missile, given the magnitude of its depth. Staring at the fresh gash in the stony ground, I wondered yet again why the Federation was hell-bent on angering the humans. Creatures with such a mastery of destruction should be appeased, not aggravated, unless your objective was the eradication of your civilization. The low whir of machinery sounded from behind me, and I flinched on instinct. Whipping around, I spotted a robotic cart stocked with firearms wheeling across the bridge, and the Terran personnel gating up as it passed by. Commander Rykov withdrew a scoped plasma rifle, and without a word handed it to me. Its weight was much heavier than I expected, and my shoulders sagged as I accepted it. Either the humans were sporting some sort of power armor, or their physical strength greatly exceeded that of my species.
General, I think we're going to have to fight our way to the embassy once we dock. Between protesters and the Federation security forces, we'll be outnumbered,
the commander said.
You know the layout of the capital better than us. Any suggestions?
I paused, tossing a few ideas around my head. Well, a diversion would help. Do you have chemical weapons on the flagship? I assume the protesters are packed close together outside the embassy, so you could hit them with some sort of gas attack. When the emergency hovercraft respond to the scene, you can use them as a shield from the special forces. I expected the human to appreciate the resourcefulness of my plan, but instead he was looking at me like I'd grown a 4th eye. His mouth opened and closed a few times as though he was struggling to find the words.
We're not doing that,
he replied at last.
Please forget I asked.
Whatever his problem with my suggestion was, it escaped my comprehension. Not only would it minimize human casualties, but it would also provide cover in a dense urban landscape. A wide-open avenue wasn't exactly ideal ground for combat and maneuvering. The flagship began a rapid descent through the planet's atmosphere, hurtling past silvery clouds. The computer's display stated that it had locked onto the landing beacon, and I steeled myself to face whatever lay ahead. As we neared our destination, I finally caught a glimpse of the ground below on screen. I had known that we would likely need to fight our way out of the spaceport before we could head towards the embassy. It came as no surprise then, when I spotted the contingent of soldiers filing into the hangar bay, weapons ready. However, I had not been expecting them to number in the hundreds, and to be solely comprised of Xanax servicemen. This was no ordinary security force, and that could make our mission more difficult than expected. I just hoped Commander Rykov had a plan, because against a unit that size, I didn't have the slightest idea how to escape the spaceport alive. Commander Rykov's orders had been not to engage the Xanax soldiers unless they shot first, but I had expected them to open fire as soon as we exited the flagship. Instead, they were milling about the spacious terminal, guns pointed at the tiled floor rather than at us. One individual immediately caught my eye. His striking dark blue feathers and pronounced beak suggested he was of noble lineage. Unlike the others, he was wearing his dress uniform rather than combat gear. I could have sworn I'd seen him in the media, though I couldn't quite place him. Was he some politician or general? If so, what in the stars was he doing out in the field? The human commander followed my gaze, and recognition flashed through his eyes as he spotted the Xanax nobleman.
At ease. Ambassador Kazil, what is this?
The Terran soldiers flanking us dropped back at the new orders, relaxing their stance. I stared in disbelief at Ambassador Kazil. Planetary ambassadors were only present at events of major significance, and for most Federation species, they were considered the highest-ranking dignitaries in their government. An ambassador accompanying a security detail to a hostile confrontation. That was simply unheard of. Kazil chuckled, a low rumbling sound.
You want to get to the Terran embassy, yes? I think my personal security detail will be a sufficient escort.
You're not here to stop us?
Rykov asked, raising an eyebrow skeptically.
Of course not. Earth is our largest foreign creditor, and also a major trading partner. It would cripple our economy for decades to go to war with you.
The ambassador replied. The human shook his head, a smirk on his face.
Let me get this straight. You're helping us, not because we're allies or because the Federation's behavior is unjust, but for money.
Exactly.
I see why our governments get along so well.
A note of amusement punctuated the commander's words.
You do realize that the Federation could go to war with you for helping us, don't you?
War? With what army? If we leave, the other military species will follow.
Kazil stretched a talon toward me.
It seems you've already won over the Jatari anyways. You've turned the highest-ranking Federation general into your errand boy.
My blood burned at the insult, and I raised my plasma rifle at the ambassador's head. Errand boy? I dare you to say that again. Commander Rykov reached over, prying the weapon from my grasp.
General, I would appreciate if you didn't shoot our only ally in the Senate.
I clenched my teeth, feeling the veins bulge in my neck. Was the commander really taking his side? Assaulting the Xanax ambassador wouldn't be the smartest move, especially while surrounded by his soldiers, but his haughty attitude was insufferable.
Yes, you should listen to the human,
Kazil said, a triumphant look in his eyes. Rykov wagged a finger at the ambassador.
Don't look so smug. You're out of line too, trying to get under Jatari's skin. The General and I both have a score to settle with a certain someone. He is not my subordinate.
Relax, I was just having a bit of fun. The Jatari are wound way too tight,
he responded.
Who is this certain someone?
Well, our business with her is unofficial, if you understand what I mean.
Rykov traced a hand down the barrel of my confiscated rifle, a dark look on his face.
We want to track down Speaker Ula.
That Dazai?
I wasn't too familiar with Xanax profanity, but I believe Dazai loosely translates to intestine brain.
She shouldn't be hard to find. Ula's on the Senate floor as we speak, raising a motion for the Terran Union's removal from the Federation.
The Senate is in session now, and you're not there? I grumbled.
I had better things to do.
Kazil looked at me for a moment, then turned his gaze back to the commander.
Frankly, I don't know why Ambassador Johnson attended. I guess she likes listening to grandstanding idiots.
Rykov laughed.
Ha 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 ha. It probably reminds her of home. In all seriousness though, do you think the motion will pass? Does Ula have the votes?
The ambassador hesitated.
I don't know. There's a lot of representatives on the fence, but your attack on the capital probably tips the scales in the speaker's favor.
Our attack? The Federation fired the first shots.
The commander protested.
It doesn't matter. That's not how Ula will tell it.
Kazil glanced at his holopad, avoiding the human's gaze.
Enough chit-chat. We should start off towards the embassy.
Rykov nodded and handed me back my firearm. Our posse trailed behind the Xanic security detail as we exited the spaceport in a brisk fashion. A few humans stayed behind on the flagship to guard it, and if necessary, lift off to avoid its capture. But most of the crew had disembarked for this mission. I assumed for most of the humans, this would be their first time seeing the capital in person. Even after hundreds of visits, I still found the city-state a sight to behold. In the emerald glow of the setting sun, the capital's architecture took on an ethereal quality. On the horizon rested the Hall of Governance, an intricate blue spheroid that housed the Senate and the military command center. The rest of the buildings encircled the hall. All Federation species were given a stretch of land, with the founding members' territory nestled in the inner ring. Embassies were often wedged between shops and cultural sites, giving each region of the city a distinct flair. The Terran's corner was famed for its street vendors and nightlife, but today, the market stalls were abandoned. A crowd of non-human protesters numbering in the thousands packed the street. The mob seemed agitated. Barricades lined the avenue to thwart their advance on the embassy. A wall of human police camped behind the barriers, pushing back any demonstrators who tried to cross the threshold. I say police in quotation marks because they were dressed head to toe in black combat gear, an outfit identical to that of a Terran soldier. The only path to the embassy was through the throng, and a few of the protesters had already noticed our presence. A group of them splintered off and charged towards us, wielding blunt weapons and makeshift projectiles. It was evident that we needed to get the demonstrators out of our way, or they would overwhelm us with sheer numbers. The same thought must have crossed Ambassador Kazil's mind, because with a whistle, he signalled for his men to drop into a firing position. The Xanic soldiers found a target, talons hovering over their trigger.
Stop! What is wrong with you people?
Rykov shrieked, sounding almost hysterical. I offered him a sympathetic smile. There's no other way. Ambassador Kazil gestured agreement, looking baffled by the human's outburst. The commander wordlessly removed the silencer from his rifle, paying no mind to approaching civilians. He aimed the barrel at the sky and fired 3 times in quick succession. I winced at the unmistakable ear-splitting pops. The protesters descending on our position scrambled backward, and I heard screams from the crowd.
The humans are shooting at us!
One voice shouted. In a matter of seconds, the demonstrators dispersed, running for their lives. They scattered off into alleyways and storefronts, clearing the path for our unit. Commander Rykov sighed, lowering his weapon.
There's always another way.
A knot of shame settled in my stomach. If not for the commander, I would have stood by and watched a needless civilian massacre. Speaker Ula really could not have been more wrong about his species. That much was obvious. The humans had no desire for death, and their first thought was always towards limiting casualties. Whatever bloodshed littered their history, they had changed. One of the police officers broke from his formation, marching down the street. He pushed his way past the Xanic soldiers, pointing an accusatory finger at Rykov.
Why are you here? I told Terran Command not to let you come.
The commander gasped, staring slack-jawed at the stranger.
Pavel? I thought you were a hostage.
The agency has ways in and out of the embassy.
Pavel unclasped his helmet, revealing a face that looked like a younger version of Rykov.
It really isn't good if any of us are captured.
What is the agency? I demanded. This your brother? Commander Rykov waved a hand dismissively.
The State Department, I told you. And yes, this is my brother. Pavel, this is...
Pavel smirked.
I know. General Kelon. An honor. And unless I'm hallucinating, the Xanic ambassador is in your little band as well.
We're at your service. On behalf of my government, we apologize for the Federation's recent actions.
Kazil said.
No need. Since you're here, you guys might as well help.
Rykov's brother gestured towards the embassy.
I have a plan to sneak some hostages out a maintenance tunnel, but it needs a distraction.
I couldn't shake the feeling that Pavel was more than just a State Department employee, though I decided not to express my doubts. What common diplomat would suit up with a militarized police force, or be drawing up tactical plans to rescue hostages? It was a relief that the commander's brother was safe, but something told me I needed to watch him very closely. I forced a smile, trying to act normal. We can do that. Just let us know what you had in mind.
I glanced at my note cards one last time as I stepped to the lectern. There was a strange sense of giddiness fluttering in my heart. With the Terran flagship firing on our sacred capital, the evidence of human treachery was now apparent. The most worrying part was how easily our trillion-credit defense system had been obliterated. If that ship was here to conquer us, of course there would be little Federation forces could do to stop them. But given how humanity liked to present itself as a docile, peaceful race in the galactic stage, it seemed more likely they would attempt to salvage the optics of their attack. We needed to end our association with the Terran Union while we still had that option. Senators, friends, I come to you today with grave news. I paused, my gaze sweeping across the packed auditorium. It seemed that all of the representatives were present, barring the empty seat reserved for the Zanic ambassador. Our capital defences were savagely bombed by an invading Terran ship, which is deploying ground troops as we speak. For anyone who believed long-term partnership with humanity was possible, you can now see that their intentions are anything but benevolent. Jatari Ambassador Palin rose to his feet, looking annoyed.
If you poke a garrat, eventually it will bite. You would destroy the Federation, thrust us into a war to prove a point. Madam Speaker, remember that you brought this upon yourself.
Leave it to the military species to jump to humanity's defense. Their brains were both wired for aggression, so no wonder they understood each other. Palin's analogy was unfitting, unless his implication was that humans were not sapient. Garrets were a non-sentient predator species indigenous to the Jatari homeworld that had been domesticated to herd cattle. If I didn't know better, I would say that that sounds like a threat, I hissed. This is not about proving a point. This is about a bloodthirsty species that has weapons that pose an existential threat to our society. If raising legitimate concerns about humanity and trying to distance ourselves from them is a crime, then I am guilty. The Federation will never throw its lot in with the planet of murderers and liars, not under my watch. Many of the representatives were signaling agreement with their body language as I spoke. The Jatari ambassador appeared to struggle for a response before returning to his seat, shoulders slumped in defeat. While Palin's immediate protest was no surprise, what was shocking was that the human ambassador hadn't said a word. A quick glance in her direction found her leaning forward in her chair, watching me with unblinking eyes. An involuntary shudder went down my spine, and I drew a deep breath to calm myself. If you believe that a species we now know has a history of systemic genocide, bloody wars and tyrannical regimes can change, then you will vote for them to remain in the Federation. I drew closer to the microphone, dropping my voice to a low whisper. All I wanted was for you to see that for all their lies and grand speeches, they have not changed. It was always a matter of time before they would turn their sights on us. I was rather taken aback when Ambassador Johnson stood, slowly clapping. Her applause seemed sarcastic in nature, especially with the smirk plastered on her face. I sighed, tapping a hoof with annoyance. Ambassador Johnson, do you have something to say? It is your right to reply, at least while Earth is still a member planet.
I have plenty to say, but the question is whether any of you will listen.
She replied.
First off, the missile launch against your defense station was unauthorized.
You're saying your ship went rogue? That's not exactly reassuring, I pointed out. What happens when the next one of your crews decides to go rogue? The human glared at me.
You directly provoked a civilian assault on our embassy, and yet you throw stones? Terran government condemns Commander Rykov's actions, but it's a clear case of self-defense. Show the logs from the station's computer, Madam Speaker. You won't, because they show that you fired on the ship first.
A series of anxious murmurs rippled across the chamber, and I could tell Ambassador Johnson's words had planted seeds of doubt in some attendees' minds. I considered challenging the notion that our station had fired first, but I suspected she would not make that claim without evidence. If the humans persuaded the representatives that it was a case of self-defense, there was a chance she could sway enough of the votes in her favor. The civilians acted on their own accord. I simply...
outright said humans weren't welcome here, condoned a race riot, and look, you're not disagreeing that our ship was fired upon.
I concede that the orbital laser launched one volley against your vessel, but they were trespassing in our space and refused to leave.
You do understand that the highest-ranking general in the Federation was among the passengers, and that ship was tasked with transporting him to the embassy, right? You assaulted a diplomatic rescue mission. Are we really the violent ones?
I could sense the balance of the chamber shifting, and I cursed under my breath. Human diplomats were known to have a way with words, and excelled at backing their opponents into a corner. It was a struggle to maintain my composure faced with such accusatory rhetoric, but I knew if I lost my temper, it was equal to defeat. Yes, you are the violent ones. Care to comment on your history? A triumphant smile inched across my face. There was no way the ambassador could defend her species' past actions, which by galactic law could be classified as crimes against sentience. Your so-called world wars and the brutal instances of ethnic cleansing. I've done my research since you launched that nanite bomb. Ambassador Johnson broke eye contact, a troubled frown crossing her lips.
We regret those years deeply. Humanity had to learn the hard way that violence is not the answer, and we nearly destroyed ourselves in the process. For all the time you've known us, We have not been that species. I urge you to recall all the good we have done in our history with the Federation, not just the evil of our primitive years. Who accepts the most refugees of any planet each year? Who sends medics to help both sides of a conflict? Who sponsors bills on sentient rights and wrote the galactic laws concerning war crimes? I don't know what else we can do to prove that we are peaceful.
You can stop building nanite bombs for one.
We only use those to protect our friends. That's right. Even after all this nonsense, we still see you as friends. The time for your games is over, Madam Speaker. We have bigger problems on our hands fighting a homicidal AI. Instead of sabotaging us at every turn, why don't you help us?
Calls of assent came from around the hall, and I gritted my teeth in frustration. For every point I made, it seemed the ambassador had a pre-prepared response at the ready. There was no way I could tolerate the Terran Union's presence among us any longer. Humans were despicable creatures. How did dealers not see the truth, even after an attack on the capital? As I was trying to think of a response, a panicked Tajili messenger burst into the chamber.
Madam Speaker, please forgive me for interrupting, but you weren't answering your holopad. We are under attack. Hundreds of battleships are descending on the capital, and our defenses are obviously offline.
You did this, I screeched, pointing at Ambassador Johnson. I knew it! The human held up her hands defensively, appearing genuinely confused.
It's not us, really.
What? Rogue ships again? Hundreds of them? I sneered.
They're not Terran Union ships. In fact, the transponders identify them as ours.
The messenger said. Pandemonium erupted among the Senate body, with dozens of representatives shouting questions at once. As far as I was concerned, humanity had to be behind this somehow. Perhaps they had hacked our military craft. I pounded a hoof against the floor, attempting to restore order. Silence! Have the attackers fired on us? Have they broadcast demands?
No shots fired yet, but they told us we have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally.
He answered. I glanced back at Ambassador Johnson, trying to gauge her response. She was staring at the empty seat belonging to the Zanic Republic, as though some revelation had occurred to her. I could have sworn the words she muttered were, "Damn it, Kazil." The human hesitated, her gaze sweeping across the chamber. Her eyes stopped on me, and I could see the unspoken question in them. She wanted the satisfaction of hearing me beg for assistance, a grovelling apology. Even if she had been truly aware of the Zanic's intentions, surely the assault would force the Terran Union's hand. So what are you going to do, Ambassador? Seize the chance to take us over? I asked, voice dripping with contempt. Ambassador Johnson snorted.
You have a funny way of asking for help.
A bitter laugh rumbled in my throat. Why would you help us?
Because as I've been telling you, we're not who you think we are. Now, I have a call to make to a certain commander. That invading flagship might just come in handy. She's got quite a few tricks up her sleeve.
After a brief moment of hesitation, I gave the ambassador a grudging nod, a human gesture, which was a concession on its own. I didn't trust an offer of assistance from humanity of all species, but under the present circumstances there was no choice but to accept it. It remained to be seen if the Terran Union would actually confront its greatest ally, but I wouldn't be holding my breath.
No mission ever went according to plan when humans were involved. Not that the plan was particularly sane to begin with, given that Pavel's distraction involved shooting rockets into the sky. I wasn't sure how lighting explosives was a good idea, unless the goal was for the humans to blow up the embassy themselves. But Commander Rykov ordered his men to set up the launch, seemingly oblivious to how bizarre his brother's suggestion was. How exactly is shooting bombs into the air going to help? I asked, unable to contain my doubts any longer. The commander chuckled.
Not bombs, fireworks.
I gave him a blank stare, unable to understand what he found amusing. So these rockets have a name. I don't see how that detracts from my point.
They're recreational explosives. Harmless, mostly.
Recreational explosives? I echoed. What does that even mean?
People shoot them off on holidays to celebrate. They're loud, explode in a bright flash of colour, but that's about it. Come to Earth on Unification Day, and you'll see plenty of them.
That is supposed to be fun.
Yes?
Our species clearly have very different ideas of fun.
Well, fun or not, it should draw the terrorists out to investigate. I take it they'll be as confused as you are.
A trail of orange embers arced through the night sky, resembling a cluster of shooting stars. A few cheers came from the Terran soldiers, most of whom were admiring the light show overhead. I winced at the volume of the burst. I wasn't fully convinced that the fire wasn't going to rain down on our position. The Zanic patrolmen seemed outright frightened, with many ducking for cover. Commander Rykov smirked, clearly trying not to laugh at a terrified Ambassador Kazil.
Relax, it's perfectly safe.
Kazil rubbed his beak nervously.
Well, I'm happy you guys decided to join the bombing run, but I wish you had waited until we weren't out in the open.
Bombing run?
Rykov and I asked in unison.
You haven't heard? Pretty soon this rock will be the joint property of the Terran Union and the Zyke Republic.
Kazil glanced in my direction, observing the shocked look on my face.
Don't worry, General. I'm sure the Jatari will be wise enough to jump ship.
It seemed the Ambassador's implication was that the Terrans and the Zanik were teaming up to invade the capital. As long as it fell to abandon the Federation I was sworn to protect, siding against Earth in a war was tantamount to suicide. The Jatari more than likely would opt for self-preservation, as would I, which is why it didn't make sense for the Commander to lie about his intentions. I frowned at my human friend. So, you're attacking the Federation? Your plan was to take over the capital all along?
Absolutely not,
the Commander growled.
There's zero chance Earth signed on to this.
Not yet, but we expect the full support of the Terran Union. Who needs to listen to those weak-minded Federation fools any longer?
Ambassador Kazil flinched as another firework detonated above, but did not falter.
Their wealth, their power, it is ours to claim. Surely you see the wisdom.
The human raised his rifle, eyes narrowing to slits.
Wisdom? I only see greed. Whatever you're planning, call it off.
The nearby Zanik soldiers pointed their weapons at the commander in response, and the Terran troops readied their guns as well. I hesitated to join the standoff, but I figured I would get caught in the crossfire anyways. Despite the fact that the humans were outnumbered 10 to 1, I aimed my rifle at Kazil. I hadn't liked him from the moment we met, and I wasn't going to miss the chance to take him out.
It's too late. We've broadcast our demands to the Federation, and if we don't follow it through, it will bring shame to our people,
the ambassador said.
If you do follow through, you will live just long enough to see your soldiers die by our hands.
A new voice came from behind me. It was Pavel, who seemed to have materialized out of nowhere.
We will overthrow your leaders, crash your economy, and fund insurgents. Then we'll claim we had nothing to do with it, and your pleas to the Federation will fall on deaf ears. You'll never have a lick of proof that we were involved in any way.
Fierce words from a diplomat of all people. Weren't you supposed to be in the embassy freeing the hostages?
Pavel inched closer to the ambassador.
New orders came in.
At first glance, Rykov's brother appeared unarmed, but something about his posture struck me as odd. Upon a closer inspection, I noticed he was holding one arm behind his back, concealing an object from Kazil's view. The commander glanced at his wristwatch, hearing the chime of a notification.
I just got new orders as well. This is primarily your civilian populace, and Terran government will not tolerate you bombing them into submission. Either you stand down, or I am to take you in as a prisoner of war.
We did this for you, for humanity. We were the first to stand at your side, and this is our reward?
Kazil chittered.
The Federation betrayed you. They are not worthy of your allegiance.
Last chance. Surrender.
Rykov hissed.
Can't do that.
Very well. Soldiers, on my command, take out all hostile forces. I want the ambassador taken alive.
Commander Rykov paused, spotting his brother slinking towards the Zanik line.
Pavel, what are you doing?
Sorry, Mikhail. We have different orders.
In one fluid movement, Pavel pounced onto the ambassador, drawing a dagger faster than my eye could track him. He sliced through the vital arteries in Kazil's neck with a clean cut, leaving the politician spluttering blood. Plasma fire erupted around me, and I pulled my rifle's trigger on instinct. I could hear the commander calling for air support, presumably from the flagship, and the Terran troops relaying orders. A human hand pulled me to the ground, and I gasped as a plasma beam whizzed right by where my head had been. I glanced back to see Mac, who was picking off Zanik soldiers with calm precision. The realization that he had likely saved my life was not lost on me, and I gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. Drawing a deep breath, I tried to collect my bearings, acquire a target, eliminate the target, rinse and repeat. Simple. I spotted a Zanik soldier crouched behind a police barricade, propping up a rocket-propelled grenade. Time slowed to a crawl as I peered through my scope, lining it up with my crosshairs. Steadying my hand, I pressed the trigger. The round scorched through the flesh of her forehead, as she crumpled to the ground in a heap. An explosion detonated a few paces from my position, taking out 2 humans. Clearly the combatant I had eliminated wasn't the only one with an RPG. Perhaps it would be wisest to move out of the open road before I was shelled to death. I noticed a small group of Terran soldiers off to my left, sheltering behind a market stall. Joining them would probably be the safest bet. We could hunker down there until air support arrived. Rising to my feet, I darted in their direction. I had only made it a few steps when a sharp pain tore through my side and I cascaded to the ground. Glancing down, I saw a small hole etched into my stomach, the flesh still sizzling around the edges. Blood spurted from the wound, staining my uniform a sickly shade of green. I tried to move, but my body refused to obey.
General!
Commander Rykov scrambled out of an alleyway and was at my side in a flash. He wrapped his arms underneath my shoulders, dragging me to safety.
It's going to be okay. I'm here.
The concern in his eyes told a different story. Your plans are all stupid. I coughed, smiling weakly. The human laughed, wiping away a tear.
Yes they are.
I stared up at the stars shining in the night sky, admiring their static beauty. The chaos of the battlefield was growing fainter, as though my ears no longer registered the sound. It was calm, quiet, still. Perhaps death was not the fiend I feared it to be. I felt at peace for the first time in a long time, ready to drift off into the night. Darkness crept in at the corners of my vision, and then the world faded away.
The flagship's arrival was heralded by a wave of death. Its seamless blend of brutish kinetic weaponry and newfangled plasma bolts mowing down everything in its path. There were no pauses, no reprieves, just an unyielding stream of destruction. Bottled into the narrow streets, the Xanic soldiers could be picked off like fish in a barrel. There was something almost beautiful in its execution, in the same way an onlooker could appreciate a surgeon's skill in dissecting a patient. I was trying to forget the green blood drenching my hands, and the lifeless alien body lying beside me long enough to relay coordinates over my headset. Calling down fire so close to my soldier's position was, of course, dangerous. A single breakdown in communication would find Terran forces on the receiving end of the cannon's volleys. I was responsible for all of the lives under my command. For my men's sake, I couldn't afford to let emotions overtake me, yet the unwanted thoughts crept in all the same. General Keelan had his flaws, but he had proved a steadfast ally at a time when those were in short supply. I liked him, often considering him with the same regard as my crew. It had been my idea to bring him along, and though I never could have imagined the bloodbath that transpired, I felt responsible for his fate. I couldn't let him die. The safe move was to sit back and wait for the dust to settle, but by then, it would be too late. A silhouette flashed at the edge of my vision, and I quickly raised my rifle.
Don't shoot!
It was Pavel, who had a red sock bandage wrapped around his leg. There was a mix of human and non-human blood on his shirt, which indicated he was hit on the torso as well.
I know I look bad, but you should see the other guy.
I gritted my teeth. I did see the other guy. That was uncalled for, and now my friend is dying because of you. I realized too late that I had referred to Keelan as a friend. Pavel's eyes flickered over the general's body, and I could almost see the gears turning in his head. He didn't say anything, but his thoughts were evident from his expression. He found my attachment to a long-time Federation officer naive and premature.
Let me see.
Pavel muttered, crouching beside the general with a grimace.
Downed by a single gut shot. I'll try to patch him up.
My brother slipped a knapsack off his shoulders, retrieving a portable first aid kit from inside. I turned my attention back to the battlefield as he began to search at the wound. A large group of Xanic soldiers were sheltering in the lobby of a luxury hotel down the road. Perhaps they thought taking refuge inside would save them from the flagship wrath. I ordered a bomb dropped onto the building and watched as moments later it imploded on itself, as easily as a house of cards. There was a grim certainty in my mind that the unit was buried, or rather crushed by the rubble. With their numbers dwindling, I expected the dozen or so remaining Xanic soldiers to surrender to the Terran Union at any moment. Sure enough, I saw a cluster of them walking backwards towards our front line, holding their rifles above their heads, the equivalent of a white flag back on Earth. Hold your fire! Disarm and restrain them, nothing else. I spoke into my headset, shooting a pointed look at Pavel. I don't want these POWs harmed in any way. Do you understand me? I thought my brother was too absorbed in the general's injuries to hear, but he nodded in acknowledgement.
We're two sides of the same coin, Mikhail. We do what needs to be done for the greater good, and we keep your hands clean.
I sighed. The agency had its uses. It helped present a unified image of Earth to the galactic community, when in reality, our regional government still squabbled over every menial policy. It swept diplomatic incidents under the rug, like the time the Horde Al caught a handful of our spies copying sensitive documents. It provided the foundation of our military intelligence, keeping us posted on the Federation military capabilities. Not that we were particularly impressed. Their Machiavellian attitude, however, left a lot to be desired. Keep telling yourself that, if it helps you sleep at night, I grumbled. How's the general? To my eyes, it wasn't apparent whether the Jatara was still breathing. The discoloration of his skin had turned in pale as a corpse, and I feared that he might well be dead.
Your friend?
Pavel lingered on the word friend, torn sharp with distaste.
Has lost a lot of blood. He needs a transfusion and a miracle. I only have human blood here.
I frowned. You're saying he's going to die?
I'd say it's likely. You can try to get him to the flagship, pump him full of fluids, put him on life support. But it's a shot in the dark.
He replied. I sucked in a deep breath. Okay, all right, that's something. I'll summon a shuttle.
I thought those were too risky to fly. The Federation could shoot them down.
We just saved their asses. They'd better not. And anyways, we have to try.
Mikhail, I doubt it will make a difference. They're not built like us. His heart is too weak, that's the problem.
What if we gave him the serum? The improved strength, recovery time, and most importantly, cardiovascular function.
You can't be serious.
The serum was the layman's way of referencing genetic nanotechnology, which was used to enhance our soldiers through gene manipulation and regenerative therapy. While humans were hardier than most aliens to begin with, the nanites mending his tissue in real time were the reason Pavel was still standing, despite being shot twice. Genetic engineering was a state secret, since it was prohibited by galactic law. Honestly, the ban existed for sensible reasons. The Federation was concerned about long-term impact on the species' gene pool. Humanity wasn't exactly a risk-averse species though, and was happy enough to experiment with the field on the down low. Earth's affairs weren't closely monitored, at least while the Federation had considered it a pacifist planet. I'm dead serious, it could work, I said.
Think about this logically for a second. He's not human, and it's never been tested on alien species. We have no idea how it will affect him. It might even kill him.
He's going to die anyways. What have we got to lose?
Let's say he lives. You think he won't figure out what we did? Then he'll spill the beans to the Federation, and we'll be right back on their shit list. Hell, what happens when he tells them we assassinated Kazil?
Keeler's not loyal to the Federation. We can trust him.
You think we can afford to take that sort of risk? We'd have to keep him on Earth permanently to be sure.
That won't be necessary. I think I can get him to defect of his own free will. Pavel's eyebrows shot up in surprise. The idea of the Terran Union recruiting a high-profile Federation officer to our ranks must have been sufficient temptation, because he began to rummage through his knapsack. He retrieved a small vial of clear liquid, filled a syringe, and injected the General without another word. I wasn't convinced that I could follow through with bringing Keel onto our side. With how honor-bound his species was, it was unclear whether he'd even considered abandoning his own world. But what was important now was saving his life. I paced back and forth as I radioed for medevac. My gaze kept drifting back to the General, studying his form for the smallest sign of hope. There was no immediate change in the Jatari's condition, but I hoped the serum could give him a fighting chance.
Clinical death. A human phrase that refers to the absence of respiration and a heartbeat. What any normal species would simply call death. The human doctor in the flagship's medical wing told me I had no vital functions for a little over 2 minutes. This claim seemed impossible, given that I was very much alive. When I pressed him on how that was possible, he basically said they beat my corpse back to life, though he dressed up the concept with scientific jargon. Chest compressions, I believe was the term. If that was the Terran idea of a joke, it wasn't very funny. That wound should have been mortal by all known medical standards. Waking up in a surreal, all-white room strung out on whatever drug cocktails were in those IVs, my first thought had been that I was dead. I still wasn't fully convinced this wasn't the afterlife, or some trick of the dying mind.
What are you thinking about?
It was Commander Rykov seated on the bar stool next to me, dressed in civilian clothes. The flagship had stopped on Luna for maintenance following our little adventure, and I had obliged his offer to hit the local pub.
You're going to stare a hole through the counter there.
I tried to snap out of my thoughts, sighing. I'm thinking I need a drink. He chuckled, beckoning the bartender.
That's the spirit. 2 shots of vodka.
The barkeep nodded, and she shuffled off to fill his request. I could feel a few stares directed at me, and I realized with a bit of discomfort that I was the only non-human in the establishment. I glanced up at the television screens on the wall, trying to distract myself. The sound was muted, but I could see closed captioning ticking across the picture. For Speaker Uller's resignation intensify after internal memos disparaging various Federation representatives were leaked to the press. The source of this information is unclear, but she has of course accused the Terran Union. What exactly did she say? I asked, pointing to the screen.
Well, for one, she called the Iroxar ambassador gutless, witless and possibly brainless. and then proceeded to say she would hardly consider his species sentient. You can see how that might be offensive.
Might be. I'd say her days as speaker are numbered. I gave the commander a pointed look, crossing my arms. I'm glad your brother's friends exposed her. Rykov stiffened, alarm flashing in his eyes.
I don't know what...
I'll stop you right there. Yes, you do, I growled. Do you think I'm stupid? We all thought the Horde Owl were just paranoid, but they were right when they said your diplomats were spies, weren't they?
Betraying us, yes. But it's best not to talk about this. The agency doesn't have rules, and it has ears everywhere.
The human had lowered his voice to just above a whisper, and I had never seen him look this uncomfortable, which unnerved me as well.
We need to talk about this anyways. Pavel wants me to ask you to keep quiet about how Kazil died. I told him we could trust you.
There was an implicit question in his words, asking whether that trust was justified. His tone was almost pleading, and his eyebrows were scrunched with concern. I suspected that worry was for my welfare, rather than his own. If these spies would waltz into the middle of a standoff and murder a planetary ambassador in cold blood, I had no doubt they would ensure my silence, one way or another. You can. My lips are sealed, I said. Next time, just give it to me straight, though. I don't appreciate that State Department BS.
I know, General, and I'm sorry. I had to maintain his cover, but I never should have dragged you into that embassy mess to begin with.
Wouldn't have missed it for the world. I wish I could have seen the look on their faces when the flagship showed up. The bartender returned, placing 2 tiny glasses of clear liquid in front of us. I squinted, inspecting the drinks with suspicious eyes. This was a rather small serving for an alcoholic beverage, but perhaps humans were more susceptible to alcohol's effects. After taking a single whiff of the drink, however, I recoiled in shock. It seemed that quite the opposite was true. Is this diluted at all? It smells like pure alcohol.
You said you needed a drink. I figured you needed the good stuff, not just a beer.
The commander downed the entire glass in a single gulp, then grinned at me.
Your turn.
I hesitated, but swallowed the drink as the human did. The strength of the brew left me coughing, my eyes streaming from its intensity. I clutched at my throat as I felt the vodka burning a trail down my gullet. The only thing that kept me from pitching out of my chair was Commander Rykov, who seemed unimpaired as he called me. What is wrong with you people? I spluttered. It seemed that my struggle had caught the attention of the bar's occupants, and many of them were having a laugh at my expense. Seeing the good-natured mirth in the commander's eyes, I couldn't help but crack a smile. I shook my head, trying to clear the fuzzy feeling from my mind. I'm pretty sure that would be considered poison in the Federation. Rykov shrugged.
The Federation is boring. One more.
I'm good.
Your loss?
I pried the human's arms off me, trying to rise to my feet. The lightheadedness wasn't exactly pleasant, so walking it off seemed like a good idea. I only staggered a few steps before lurching to the floor. Reaching for the counter was to no avail. All I achieved was cutting my hand against its edge. I winced at the stinging sensation and studied my palm. Pure shock rocketed through my veins as I saw the wound shrinking before my eyes, closing itself off as though by magic. The pain dulled to a gentle tingling, with the injury site feeling uncomfortably warm. That was not normal. Maybe it was the vodka. No, that isn't how alcohol worked. If only I could think straight right now. I stared at Commander Rykov, hoping he had some explanation. There was no way I would have believed such a thing if I hadn't seen it with my own 3 eyes. A chill shot down my spine as I realized the human looked more alarmed than surprised. What exactly had they done to save my life? Something told me I hadn't been given the whole truth. Again. What did you do? I spat.
Look, it was my fault that you got shot. I had to fix it. I had to...
He muttered. My anger was already giving way to confusion. I'm sorry, what? I don't blame you. I knew what I was getting into. Now I ask again. What did you do?
We, injected you with experimental nanotechnology.
I took a few ragged breaths, trying to process the information. Humans weaponized nanites, then turned around and used them for medicinal purposes. The whole thing sounded both illegal and dangerous. But since I would have been dead without the intervention, did I really have a right to complain? It didn't seem to have done any harm. In fact, a sample of my blood could be quite useful to the Jatari Confederacy. I suspected if the 2 remaining military species wanted to remain relevant, we needed to play catch-up to Terran technology, or else the Federation might turn to Earth as its sole protector. Reverse engineering would speed up that process by decades. Right now, the Terran Union was a friend, and I hoped it would stay that way. But times and governments change. and being at the mercy of humanity's mood swings didn't seem like the best foreign policy decision. It was likely the Confederacy would try to step in as Earth's new trading partner, and after witnessing the implosion of the Xenic Republic, I knew we needed to take a more cautious approach, not get too entangled or dependent.
General, please talk to me.
The commander's voice was pleading, almost desperate.
I'll tell you whatever you want to know.
I dusted myself off, rising on unsteady legs. I want to know what your thing is with nanites. He laughed, clapping me on the back.
Ha 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 ha. You're a piece of work.
I smiled, but my mind was elsewhere. Perhaps it would be mutually beneficial if you brokered some sort of under-the-table deal. We could advance the humans' research, offer them a generous amount of credit in exchange for arms and technology. Now that I realized how fond the Terrans were of subtlety, I figured I just needed them to get my government to join them in the shadows. I decided to broach the subject with the commander later, when I was sober and we were somewhere less public. With any luck, our friendship would lead to a long-lasting partnership between our species, as equals.
So why exactly was the refugee camp set up on a military base? I asked. Carl's face revealed nothing as he glanced up from his cards.
Not everyone believes your little story, BM. They want to keep an eye on you, make sure you're not a threat. Wouldn't want you trying anything back on Earth.
After the rescue mission on our homeworld, the humans moved us to a military outpost on the terraform colony. From what I understood, its chief function was as a listening station, though it could also serve as a launch point for a preemptive strike if needed. They cropped up a tent city on the premises with relative ease, and had ample food reserves to accommodate us, at least for a few weeks. Carl had requested a transfer to the refugee camp while he recovered from his injuries, which I was grateful for. I could tell a lot of the Terran soldiers didn't like us from their strained body language and curt replies. The three other humans at the table hadn't so much as looked at me throughout the game. I'd only been taught this poker game yesterday, but the rules were simple enough. Trying to read the humans for signs of deception was another story. Honestly, this game seemed designed for sociopaths. Did their species derive pleasure from lying? With a frustrated sigh, I folded my hand. Obviously you humans are much better at lying than me. Cal smirked, raking in my chips.
You can't just let us bully you. Sometimes you have to call. Can I look at your cards?
Go for it, I grumbled.
BM, why did you fold?
The look he gave me seemed almost angry, and I shrunk down in my seat.
You had pocket aces. You know that's good, right?
Yes, but I don't know what you had.
It doesn't matter. That's literally the best starting hand.
What did you have? Cal flipped over his cards, revealing a 2 and a 7. I heard a few curses coming from the man next to me, and I was half tempted to drop some colourful language as well. Why would he make a large bet with such a weak hand? It defied all logic. Maybe I'm just not wired for this, I said.
Hey, don't give up now. How about instead of worrying about lying, you look at it as a math game? Try to figure out the odds that someone has...
A wailing alarm drowned out the end of Carl's explanation, startling me half to death. With its shrill pitch, it was unmissable. I covered my ears, but it did little to muffle the sound. Fear began to creep up on me. Nothing that loud could mean anything good. I glanced at the humans, hoping for some reassurance. They looked puzzled, yet I got the distinct impression they were waiting for orders.
Incoming orbital raid.
A low mechanical voice confirmed my concerns.
All soldiers to your station. This is not a drill.
All games and leisure were forgotten in an instant. The automated message hadn't even finished before my friend was tugging me by the arm, leading the way out of the lounge. I followed him in a daze. Our peaceful stay at the camp had lulled me into a false sense of security. They would be foolish enough to attack the invincible Terran military after all. I was tempted to ask, but Carl seemed just as surprised as me. We exited the building with haste, and I took a peek at the pandemonium around us. Terran soldiers were nearly tripping over themselves, racing to their destinations, while the medical personnel were shuffling refugees off to a bunker. A squadron of fighter jets was already lined up on the tarmac, preparing to take to the skies. The response to the attack was almost immediate. The humans could intercept the enemy before they ever reached the planet. I slowed my pace, trying to catch my breath. Where are we going?
I'm taking you to the bomb shelter with the others.
Carl replied. I frowned. What about you?
Well, they want me there too, because I'm not cleared to fly yet.
He tightened his grip on my wrist, wordlessly telling me to keep up with him.
But I'm getting on a ship, one way or another.
I'm coming with you. Something about leaving Carl to fend for himself didn't sit well with me, despite the protests of my self-preservation instincts. Maybe I was just trying to convince myself that I wasn't a coward anymore. You need a gunner. I'm your guy.
I don't know, but you sound sure. All right, let's get a move on it.
He veered towards the nearest hangar, strides brisk and confident.
If anyone stops us, let me do the talking.
A few shocked looks were thrown in my direction as we entered the hangar, which I ignored. The structure was packed full of spacecraft which all looked pristine and well maintained. Most of them had slim, angular designs indicating they were built for speed. A few larger craft were present, which were likely the heavy hitters. There was nothing of the flagship's caliber in stock, but it was still a sizable armada. Carl steered us towards a skirmisher. He helped me into the back seat before climbing behind the steering column. It was a much cozier fit than the craft we flew before. As I fastened my safety harness, I heard the human switch on the comms relay, and a transmission crackled over the speakers.
Pick up, damn it! What in God's name are you doing?
An angry male voice asked. Carl cleared his throat.
We're going to kill some alien bastards, sir.
You're not going with that thing in tow,
came the reply. My friend's expression darkened.
That thing has a name. The M flew honorably under Commander Rykov.
Rykov is a bleeding heart, and everyone treats the guy like a damn folk hero.
He is a hero, and more importantly, he's a good man. But that's beyond the point. Sir, I trust the M with my life. What does an extra set of hands hurt?
We have plenty of folks raring to go as is. The first squadron is confronting the enemy now. This will be over soon anyways.
A female voice buzzed onto our channel, which I assumed was the emergency frequency.
Sir, we've lost contact with our fighters.
What?
There was a pause, and then a measured response.
How many of them?
All of them,
she replied. The man was stunned to silence, which stretched on for several seconds.
Blondie, you still there?
Carl frowned, but didn't correct his name.
Still here, sir.
You're cleared for takeoff. Get that bird off the ground before I change my mind.
Yes, sir.
I shifted in my seat as our craft rolled out of the hangar, falling in at the tail end of the queue. If none of the ships sent out in the first wave returned, what did that mean for us? Were they dead? Would we be dead soon? I didn't think there was an army in the galaxy cluster that could trade blows with the humans, let alone annihilate an entire squadron. The thought crossed my mind that it was the AI. Perhaps it had learned from its defeats, and after sufficient study, it was able to replicate or negate Terran technology. That would also explain why a little-known outpost in a fringe system had been attacked. It was here to prove that no escape was possible, or in its words, to reclaim its resources. I tried to shake the idea, but the more I considered it, the more I was certain it was true. My nerves were replaced by a cold resolve. After tasting freedom, if only for a few days, I couldn't go back to life in chains. Death would be preferable. The Terran military had scrambled several hundred fighters into upper orbit, which fanned out in a defensive alignment. Our communications began to malfunction while we were ascending through the atmosphere, which explained the silence of the initial squadron. There would be no patching into the ground headquarters, it was only us and them. I finally knew what it was like to be on the other side of our invasions. It only took one look at the enemy forces to recognize our craft, the same ones I had piloted for years. They seemed to be swarming the planet from all sides like insects descending on a fresh carcass. Something had clearly changed since our last encounter. The Terran fleet was spewing missiles with relentless fury, but our opponents swatted them away with ease. The once omnipotent nanite weapons were disabled with pulses, while antimatter and plasma weapons bounced harmlessly off their shields. We were caged in, outnumbered, and our only option was to claw our way out. The odds did not seem in our favour. If that wasn't enough reason for concern, a massive destroyer lurked at the back of the enemy formation. I knew it was brimming with weapons designed to render the planet uninhabitable through radiation and atmospheric poisoning. The only positive I could find in the situation was the AI didn't seem to have replicated the worst human weaponry, but it didn't need to. It could neutralize the onslaught of projectiles and simply weather the storm. The humans would run out of explosives eventually. What's the plan? I flicked through the holographic firing display, trying to stop my hands from shaking. We do have a plan, right? Carl glanced over his shoulder.
We improvise, just like last time, remember?
Last time we almost died, I snapped.
Almost is the key word.
The human offered a reassuring smile, but something told me he was convincing himself as much as me.
Look, the shields clearly got an upgrade, but the thing about shields is, they aren't great at stopping smaller projectiles. I say we try mini-explosives.
I stared at him in disbelief. Your missiles aren't working, so you want to shoot it with smaller missiles?
We can shoot it with bullets too. You know, kinetics.
You really think any of that will work?
Honestly, I don't know, but it's worth a shot.
Carl ran a hand through his frosty hair.
If they want to take this planet, they'll have to get to us. Their next target could be Earth.
On the bright side, it couldn't work any less than what the humans had already tried. Carl wasn't wrong that the smaller weaponry could penetrate shields, but it would require multiple hits. As soon as we moved in, though, I had no doubt we would sustain heavy fire. The enemy was likely banking on aggressive action. We'd have to chip away at their armor, striking at the ship's most vulnerable compartments. I knew exactly where to aim for, but whether I could hit those targets in a split second, in the heat of battle, was another question. I switched over to the miniature missiles. They were typically used as interceptors according to the computer, but could be used for offensive purposes if necessary. We accelerated towards the enemy fleet, and our allies fell in behind us, inspired by our advance. 5 AI ships closed around us, ready to pick us off. I targeted the nearest craft and offered up a silent prayer to the universe that our desperate, suicidal play would work. A salvo of explosives, tiny enough to fit in the palm of my hand, sailed through the inky blackness. They homed in on the vessel's right flank, slipping through the shields. The armor repelled the attack with only a dent and a few burn marks to show, but I had found the sweet spot, right by the propulsion systems. The ship began to veer off course as it lost its steerability. Carl weaved off to the right, dodging a string of plasma rounds fired by the damaged vessel's partners. I was ready to turn my attention to a different ship, but the human wanted to go for the kill. He swerved back towards the crippled craft, narrowly avoiding a collision with it. He pointed us straight above it, giving me a clean look at the target.
Same spot, BM. Fire now!
He shouted. I launched another volley without hesitation. This time the ship lost all semblance of control, plunging into a dizzying tailspin. The planet's gravity well only encouraged its forward trajectory, drawing it towards the surface. The Terran ships parted around the doomed craft, then forged ahead with renewed spirit. They emulated our tactics, hurling tiny missiles at the opposing fleet. Who would have thought to attack a fortress with pebbles, but the humans? The enemy vessels concentrated all of their firepower on our advance. They had been caught off guard at first, but they would compensate quickly. A few of our allies met an untimely end as potent plasma rounds found their mark. These human ships were designed to take a beating. We had to rely on their quick, nimble frames to evade incoming projectiles, because a single shot spelled death for us. Carl dipped down to avoid the stream of fire, taking advantage of our 3-dimensional battlefield.
Switch over to bullets. We're going to hit the beast's soft underbelly.
Clever tactics. Typically in space warfare, the high ground relative to your opponent, of course, was considered advantageous, which was why our ships confronted each other on the same plane. It was also why they wouldn't expect us to carry out an assault from below, especially while they were preoccupied with the charging ships above. While kinetics was fairly weak, I found them much easier to aim than their more powerful successors. Also, it was possible to fire dozens of rounds in rapid succession without so much as a pause. I unleashed a spray of bullets at the ship's underside, hoping to bombard them into submission. The sight of atmosphere venting indicated that we had indeed poked a few holes in their armor. Unfortunately, none of the ships seemed incapacitated. We were more of a nuisance than a threat. A warning flashed on the weapon screen, indicating a heat-seeking missile locked onto us. I suddenly wished that we hadn't drawn their attention. I cleared my throat. Carl? There's...
I see it. Try not to lose your lunch, okay?
He replied. I don't waste food, but how? I stopped as our ship switched directions in an instant, beginning an upward climb at full speed. Acid gurgled in my throat and I tried to swallow it down. Oh, that means puke, doesn't it? You're not going to outrun a missile, you know.
Wasn't planning on it.
The missile was mere second from catching us as Carl righted the fighter once again on the same heading as the enemy. The humans steered us straight towards a rival ship, showing no signs of slowing down. As we battled towards a collision, I couldn't help but wonder if his plan was suicide. Surely he was going to turn away and enact some defensive measures. We brushed just over the enemy's hull, so close that I swore our metal skeletons grazed each other. Our craft snaked around theirs, ducking down on the other side. The missile, which was meant for us, instead ploughed into them, and their ship absorbed the worst of the antimatter punch. Its shields held, but barely. The flicker of electricity around its shell hinted they were faltering. I didn't need instruction from Carl to seize this opportunity. If its defenses truly were down, we only had a brief window before it recovered. I switched to our plasma rounds, hoping they would work at last. The shot scorched through its vulnerable flesh, turning it to a withered husk in seconds. I knew its occupants were dead when the ship did not deviate from its aimless drift. If there were any survivors, they would have fired back. Our skirmisher twisted through the enemy formation, zigzagging to avoid a slew of plasma fire. Our little ship was becoming quite a thorn in their side, and they were no doubt keen to take us out. For a moment, I felt like we were dancing through the night sky. There was an effortless grace in Carl's evasive maneuvers, and the thought crossed my mind that nothing could touch us. I must have jinxed it, because that's when a round clipped our left wing. The fighter's frame rattled beneath me, and I wondered if the craft would break apart. By some miracle, we hobbled to their rear flank, still in one piece. Our ship's condition was worrisome. She was slowed, tilting to one side and running dangerously low on ammo. I wasn't sure how much fight she had left in her, but we had to press on. If this was our last stand, so be it. I took a glance around at the battlefield, trying to think of our next move. A sea of shrapnel and wounded ships had spawned amongst the living, perhaps best described as a graveyard. The enemy appeared to have suffered more losses than the Terrans, but it didn't matter. As one of their ships fell, another popped up in its place. The humans fought with blinding intensity, but our forces were dwindling too quickly. We couldn't hold the line much longer. The planet-killing destroyer was creeping ever closer as well. If it was allowed within firing range, it would decimate the life forms below, and that would be the end of the refugee program. Our last-ditch efforts needed to be focused on stopping it. Some of the humans seemed to have come to the same conclusion. A few dozen Terran ships were encircling the beast, hitting it with every type of ammunition from every angle. Nothing seemed to harm it, or even slow it down. I wished I could suggest a weakness to target, but to my knowledge it didn't have any. "Carl, you see that destroyer?" I asked. He frowned, squinting in the viewport.
That big, ugly trapezoid?
"Yes. If we're going to lose, we need to take that ship out at all costs."
I understand.
The human fell quiet. I expected him to argue that we weren't going to lose, but he only sighed.
BM, it's been an honor.
Likewise. The ship's engines accelerated for perhaps the final time, and we sailed towards certain death. The destroyer functioned as bait in a way, forcing the human fleet to overextend. It lured the largest, most ferocious Terran battleships into its vicinity, and kept them out with a larger fray. While our big guns battered the Doomsday ship with laser fire and missiles, they were easy targets for the enemy to pick off. If those guys couldn't breach the destroyer's shields, none of our ships could. I decided our best play was to cover them and buy them a bit more time. I noticed the enemy surging around one particular human battleship, a Titan-class behemoth. It appeared to have sustained heavy damage, but was still limping towards the planet killer. Perhaps they were planning a bombing run at point-blank range. Whatever the case, our foes clearly didn't want it to reach its destination, or else they wouldn't have diverted 15 craft to attack a single ship. I glanced at the sensor data from our computer and did a double take. The energy readings from that Terran battleship were off the charts. The warp drive seemed to be destabilizing. My first thought was that an enemy shot had hit the reactor, but the computer detected only minor damage to that compartment. Rather, it appeared the humans had shut off the cooling system, as though they were trying to cause a quantum meltdown on purpose. "What are they doing? Their reactor is going to go critical," I hissed. Carl checked his own display, then chuckled.
Son of a gun. They're going to use the ship as a bomb.
"That is suicide."
No, that's sacrifice. There's a difference. Why don't we give those guys a hand?
I readied the kinetic weapons without further comment. This was hardly the time to muse about human courage. We swooped into the fray, lighting the enemy up from their blind side. A few of the ships snapped their attention to us, giving our allies a slight reprieve. Their first instinct was likely to pick us off with plasma rounds, but Cal had pulled us in dangerously close to their position. Any shots fired at us would risk hitting their own ships, not that it would make a difference. Our opponents had precision weapons and would target us without batting an eye. As two antimatter missiles locked onto us, I prepared myself for the final flash, and hoped that we had done enough. In our ship's weakened state, there would be no evasive maneuvers.
Deploy the last mini-missiles, BM.
Cal barked. My fingers obeyed before my brain processed his request. If their original purpose was as interceptors, perhaps they could stop the inbound projectiles. I watched with bated breath as the tiny warheads arced through space, planting themselves in the path of the missiles. The antimatter blast was set off before reaching us, but I knew we wouldn't be so lucky next time. Our vessel peeled back before they could target lock us again, circling for another pass. I could feel the ship shuddering each time we turned. In her current condition, we were pushing the limits of her capabilities. The warning lights panel looked like abstract art, with more colourful indicators blinking to life every second. Most of the enemy craft had turned their focus back to the suicidal battleship. It was easy enough for them to brush off any Terran skirmishers that came to their allies' aid. However, one of their fighters had tracked our movement and veered off from the pack. It was zipping towards us at full speed, plasma weapons primed for the kill. I lined it up in our sights, resigned to another shootout. At this point, it was more about taking as many of them with us rather than surviving. My resignation morphed into pure terror as I saw a predatory-traced smile on Carl's face. Humans usually had that expression right before they did something insane.
Let's play a little game of chicken, shall we?
He growled. A high-pitched yelp escaped my throat as our ship accelerated to full speed, and I was flung back in my seat. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, and I noticed new warnings popping up on the engine column. What exactly was this chicken game the human referred to? I was pretty sure I didn't like it, since it seemed to involve playing with our lives. We swerved right into our adversary's path, putting us moments away from a head-on collision. All coherent thoughts evaporated as the enemy fighter stared us down. Despite our imminent demise, Carl made no attempts to slow down or turn away. My instinct screamed to lunge forward, grab the control column, and steer us out of danger, but I couldn't move. At the last possible second, our opponent deviated from their course. I exhaled a sigh of relief, realizing that I hadn't breathed in much too long. No wonder I was so lightheaded. My entire body was trembling, overwhelmed by the fear chemicals pumping through my veins. Carl, meanwhile, clapped his hands together, grinning from ear to ear.
Cowards! Cheer up, them. They blinked, not us.
I massaged my temples, groaning. Carl, I'm okay with dying, but we don't have to actively encourage it.
Nonsense. Like we say on Earth. I'd rather go out with a bang there, Whimper. Our friends will ram the bastards in 30 seconds tops, so hit him with everything we got.
The route back to the Terran battleship side was clear after our little stare down. We sawed past its assailants and I unleashed every bit of ammunition we were carrying, even types I knew wouldn't work. None of our hits landed any serious damage, but fortunately help had arrived. Most of the remaining human vessels had joined the suicide mission protecting the battleship at all costs. I saw a few hurl themselves into the line of fire, using their puny skirmishers as shields. Others rammed into enemy ships, pushing them away from the battleship. The humans were unyielding in the face of death, undeterred as their allies fell around them. When pressed against a wall, their bloodlust bordered on insanity. I drained the last of our ammunition, watching as the battleship crossed the final stretch. It buried its nose in the destroyer's side, and the impact was enough to tip its destabilized reactor over the edge. The meltdown unleashed staggering amounts of energy on the planet kill's insides, and to my amazement, it burst apart at the seams. The once untouchable destroyer fractured into several pieces, which began to crumple in on themselves. Our sensors detected magnetic fluctuations, hinting that their own reactor was cascading out of control. It teetered on the edge of order and destruction for a few tense moments before spilling into chaos. The scraps of the mighty ship fused together in a deformed monstrosity, folding up like a paper ball. Our communications crackled to life, startling me. Whatever had been jamming our transmissions must have been aboard the destroyer. The voice belonged to the same officer who had tried to stop us earlier.
All Terran ships, you are ordered to retreat. Abandon system. I repeat, abandon system. Get word back to Earth at all costs.
I was shocked to hear the word retreat called out over our feed. I hadn't been certain the word even existed in the human lexicon. Carl leaned forward, a frown on his face.
Sir, what about the refugees?
Oh, it's you.
The officer's tone carried a mixture of disdain and disappointment.
You guys bought us some time. We're sending transports out now. Whether we can warp out before we get shot down, I don't know.
The Devourers will be on you in seconds. They're everywhere. You need an escort.
We're probably going to die, I'm aware. If you stick around, you will too, pretty boy.
My friend shook his head, clicking off the radio with a frustrated sigh. He glanced back at me, sympathy in his gaze. No doubt he was aware of our lack of ammunition, and the damage to our ship. There was nothing more we could achieve. We had done everything we could. Any reasonable being would leave, and live to fight another day.
He's right, BM.
Carl finally spoke.
If I thought it would make a difference, I would stay. But with this ship...
I tried to suppress the guilt fog in my mind. It wouldn't be fair to ask Carl to die a painless death after all, just because I had my son's death on my conscience. But I knew then and there, abandoning my people would haunt me for the rest of my life. That even if the humans won down the road, I would be the sole survivor of an extinct species. Of course, I know. I was surprised how curt my tone was, flat and emotionless. It didn't even sound like my voice. To Earth, then. My friend plugged in the coordinates with haste, as we didn't have a moment to spare. A cluster of enemy ships were nearing our position, surrounding us on all sides. Most of our surviving allies had already jumped away, which made any stragglers easy targets. I hoped our warp drive was still working, because if not, we were about to get dusted. Our surroundings shimmered as we slipped into hyperspace, and the battlefield faded away. My mind drifted to thoughts of vengeance, anger burning in my chest. Someone, or something, needed to pay for what happened today.
A human hand clamped down on my shoulder, jolting me out of my slumber.
Wake up, General.
The voice was firm and insistent.
We need to talk.
I groaned, taking a glance at the clock. It was less than an hour since I drifted off, and I sorely needed to sleep. As much as I liked Commander Rykov, he'd better have a good reason for waking me. Can't it wait until later? It's...
No, we have a problem. A major one.
Was that fear in his voice? My brain snapped to attention in an instant, and I rolled out of bed without further protest. If it frightened the commander, it could only mean one of two things. Either the humans had done something terrible, or there was an apocalyptic threat on the horizon. I wasn't sure which one I was more worried about. Rykov led the way out of my quarters, waving a path through the flagship's winding corridors. His silence was unsettling, and rather out of character. As tempting as it was to demand answers, I had a feeling I was going to get them soon enough. We turned into a conference room, where two individuals were waiting for us. I recognized the Devourer refugee from our earlier adventures, but not the blonde human sitting next to him. The human was slumped in his chair, looking defeated and exhausted. BM had a distant look on his face, not even reacting to our presence. The commander cleared his throat, frowning with displeasure.
Captain Larson, please repeat what you told me, including the part about leaving a refugee camp to their deaths.
Captain Larson flinched, as though he had been slapped.
With respect, sir, our fighter was crippled and out of ammunition. It would only have been an exercise in futility.
I don't want your excuses. Just start from the beginning,
Rykov said.
Well, to keep a long story short, we set up a refugee camp on a military base, which the Devourers attacked with no warning. Their shields got an upgrade. None of our main weapons worked, and most of our fleet was killed in action.
The blonde captain paused, gauging my reaction. I managed to keep my expression neutral, but a knot of fear was forming in the pit of my stomach.
Our CO ordered us to retreat from the system. We believe they'll be en route to Earth shortly.
It had been mere days since the Terrans' decisive victory over the Devourers, and their weapons had already been rendered ineffective. I shuddered as I recalled how easily the humans had blown through the capital's defences. The Federation's artillery seemed like toys in comparison. If none of their firepower worked, we didn't stand a chance. I couldn't help but feel responsible, as I was the one who persuaded Rykov not to glass their world. In hindsight, perhaps the Devourers should have been put down, while chance permitted. It would have been the pragmatic option, though not the moral one. To my recollection, Ambassador Johnson said something along the lines of, "I'd rather they die than us," in her infamous Senate speech. Now with the entire galaxy facing extinction, maybe the Federation would understand those words. "Did this base have nanite weapons?" I asked. Captain Larson sighed.
Of course. All of our outposts have them.
I didn't even want to address the implications of that comment, since it meant the humans possessed thousands of those reality-bending missiles. A stockpile of that size. Were the Earthlings planning to level a small galaxy or something? There has to be some sort of weakness, some chink in their armor, I mused.
Smaller weapons. Those don't exactly pack a real punch, though.
Larson drummed his fingers on the table, eyes rolled back in thought.
They're vulnerable to ramming tactics. Not that I'd try that first.
Those options are less than ideal, I agreed. So how soon will they reach Earth?
My best guess? A few hours?
Right. We were doomed. I glanced at Commander Rykov. Please tell me you have one of your terrible plans.
Well...
Not even a smirk from the dark-haired human. He was avoiding eye contact, which wasn't a good sign.
I think we have to bring out the doomsday weapons.
I almost keeled over in shock as I tried to process his words. Those nanite bombs, which could disintegrate an entire fleet, weren't their last resort weapons. According to their simulations, those had a 5% chance of destroying the universe. Whatever Rykov was referring to, it had to be truly appalling. "I'm sure I'm going to love this," I grumbled. "What exactly are they?" The commander looked down at the silent BM, his frown deepening.
We call them grav bombs. They can be used to cause a stellar explosion. Some in the Federation will see us as monsters. They already do. But we need to finish the job.
Humanity had the power to snuff out stars. They could render entire systems uninhabitable in a flash, damning species with the wave of a hand. By now, I was well aware that they were a dangerous species to befriend, but their capacity for violence never ceased to amaze me. Why would they even dream up such a thing during centuries of peacetime? No doubt leaders in the Federation would ask the same question if this plan worked, and perhaps rightfully so. At least they would be around to raise those concerns. I couldn't see another way forward. If the Devourer AI wasn't eliminated, it would be our worlds reduced to dust instead. Captain Larson leaned over, nudging BM in the shoulder.
What do you think?
Do it.
The Devourer refugee shifted slightly, face void of emotion.
There are fates worse than death. We've suffered enough.
And you, General? Do I have your blessing?
Rykov asked. Always. One thing though, would the Devourers see us coming, try to stop us?
I'm sure they've left some ships behind. We'll have to fight our way through.
What about the ones heading for Earth?
According to BM, they're programmed with a kill switch. If they lose contact with the homeworld, we wipe out the AI. We kill two birds with one stone.
I grimaced. What we were about to do amounted to genocide, and I can't say it sat well on my conscience. Millions of enslaved devourers would perish along with the AI, and there would be no opportunity for us to rescue any of them. Despite his calm words, the strain on the commander's face told me he felt the same burden. It has to be done. We should set off as soon as possible, I said. Rykov nodded.
Right then. Larson, BM, disembark at once. My guards will escort you out.
But sir, we want to join you.
The captain protested.
That was an order. You both look like hell.
The commander turned towards me, and I noticed the dark circles under his eyes. He didn't look so good himself.
General, follow me to the bridge. I have a private matter to discuss on the way.
I loped after him, finding it much easier to keep up with his brisk strides than before. The nanite therapy must have had a positive impact on my fitness. I certainly felt stronger, younger even. That reminded me, I needed to work out a deal to bring the technology home. It could improve the quality of life, revolutionize the field of medicine, and bolster our forces. With human innovations in our pocket, we could bring about the new golden age of the Jatari. Perhaps it's not the right time, but... I hesitated, trying to find the right words. If we survive all this, I was thinking the Jatari could help with your nano research. If you want partners, that is.
Yes, that's what I wanted to speak to you about as well.
The commander ran a hand through his hair, sighing.
I promised you no more bullshit, so here's the truth. You understand how dangerous nanotech can be. The last thing Earth wants is it falling into the wrong hands, so they don't want it leaving our territory under any circumstances.
I see. That wouldn't happen to include me, would it? The human was silent. Well, shit. Am I a prisoner?
I wouldn't do that to you, but others will. I've liked having you on board, and I thought maybe you could stick around. As my first officer.
You're suggesting I join the Terran military?
Yes.
A command post sounded better than a dark cell, that was for sure. A permanent stay with the humans wasn't quite what I had in mind, but it didn't sound like I had any choice in the matter. Rykov clearly had known what exposing me to the nanite would entail, but I couldn't fault him, since the alternative was for him to let me die. However, the thought of never seeing home again was almost too much to bear, and something told me the humans would make a public procession out of my transfer, using it for PR purposes. My legacy would be destroyed, my name cursed and slandered among my people. I would be remembered as the general who jumped ship at the first sign of trouble, and that I could truly not live with. Do you know what my people do to traitors, Commander? Because that is how they will see defection. The ones they capture, they gut from head to toe, then pour acid inside their bodies, and your bloodline is considered tainted for 100 generations. Your family mocked and beaten. Any feat you ever achieved burned from the pages of history. Your name only spoken with the most vile curses. It would be better to die.
Then we tell them you died, with honor. They don't know you're alive.
That might be acceptable. I will think on it. My primary loyalties would always lie with the Jatari, but perhaps I could find a way to guard their interests from afar, the same way the humans kept an eye on their neighbours. If it were up to me, our species would work together, but if the Terran Union was so determined to keep its progress to itself, a different approach was necessary. None of those concerns would be relevant if we failed in our mission, of course. The fate of the galaxy hinged on the next few hours, and it would be nice if just this once, everything went according to the plan. The last official engagement I saw the humans partaking in, they deployed a total of 5 ships. That was all they needed. This time, they had raised a proper armada, gathering thousands of their finest vessels. Word had been sent to the Federation, informing them of the disaster at the refugee camp, and warning them to prepare for a Devourer incursion in case of our failure. However, the Terrans opted not to request any military assistance or divulge the specifics of their plan. No doubt the speaker's sabotage was still imprinted in their memory. Earth's sudden mobilization, despite their given reasons, no doubt raised some alarms back in the Federation. The two parties deeply mistrusted each other in light of recent events, and I was doubtful that would ever wear off. Hell, even I was frightened of humanity at times. But now, as we walked towards our final confrontation, I was only worried about the humans, especially Rykov. Perhaps I didn't understand human body language, but his posture signaled pain to me. He was huddled over his holo display, head bowed. His shoulders sagged as though a weight had been placed upon them. Was he truly prepared to do what was necessary? I sidled up to him, nudging him on the arm. "Are you all right? You seem like you're having second thoughts."
"Quite. Don't worry, I won't hesitate."
The human sighed, shaking his head.
"The people at home won't understand what we sacrifice, what we give of ourselves. Perhaps you don't either, General."
"Dying? Almost dying. Getting shot?" I offered. Rykov chuckled bitterly.
"Beyond that, you don't come back the same person. You have to live with the terrible things you've done, and you just try to convince yourself it was right."
"It is right. Trillions of lives will be saved. I think there is honor in that," I replied.
"Perhaps. There are no good choices today,"
he said.
"But believe me, I take no pleasure."
The ship rocked violently as we were thrown out of hyperspace on the fringes of the Devourer system. I skidded across the floor, groaning as I collided with a metal chair. That hardly seemed like a controlled emergence. It seemed that we had run into a warp-disrupting field. The enemy must have installed some new defenses while we were away. I heard cursing a few lengths from me, and saw Commander Rykov on his knees. It appeared he collided headfirst with the workstation. Grimy red blood was streaming from his nostrils, and his nose was jutting unnaturally off to the side. That definitely was broken, and in my estimation, entailed a considerable amount of pain. I crawled over to the human. "You require medical attention. I can oversee." The commander picked himself up, gritting his teeth.
It's but a scratch. Soldiers, I want weapons powered up yesterday. Shoot anything that moves that isn't one of ours."
I limped after him, staring in disbelief. Was he really going to carry on like nothing happened? Humans were tougher than they looked.
"Sir, we have another problem,"
an ensign called.
"It appears the enemy detached a breaching pod. A boarding party has infiltrated the ship."
My antennae twitched in confusion. Since when do they board ships?
"I think they have a special hatred for this one."
The commander frowned, wiping a fresh stream of blood off his lip.
"General, we're a little short on foot soldiers. I'd like you to meet up with my security team in the main hangar and take care of the welcoming committee. Keep them alive if possible."
Despite several tours of the flagship, I wasn't sure where the main hangar was, but I thought I could figure it out. The last thing I wanted was to look incompetent as the ship's soon-to-be first officer. I gave Rykov a nod, retrieving a plasma rifle from the weapons cart. The gun was much lighter than I remembered, which I attributed to the nanite enhancements. My departure from the bridge was swift, and I hoped that following my instincts would bring me to my destination. But after rounding a few corners, it became apparent I was heading in the wrong direction. The cupboards of pill bottles and syringes suggested that this was the medbay. There wasn't a physician in sight. Non-combatants were probably locked down until the ship was secured. I surveyed the walls, looking for a map. There had to be some sort of direction somewhere, for evacuation procedures at least. My ears perked up as footsteps echoed down the hall, and I sighed in relief. Perhaps these humans could steer me on the right course. I was about to call out, but then I realized something was off. Those weren't the heavy thuds of Terran boots. Instead, they were a tapping sound like raindrops striking a rooftop. I ducked into a doctor's office, peering around the wall. There were 5 Devourer soldiers by my count, slinking through the hallways. They seemed to be sweeping the premises for any stragglers. I pressed my gun to my chest, trying to steady my breathing. My only hope was to ambush them and take several out before they knew what hit them. Shadows stretched past the doorframe, which suggested they would pass the office in a matter of seconds. My finger found the trigger as soon as they crossed my vision. A plasma round sailed through the lead soldier's forehead and he crumpled to the ground. Fueled by survival instincts, I charged at the other 4 in an animalistic frenzy. Before they could shoot back, I had tackled another guy and rolled him on top of me to serve as a shield. His friends opened fire, and I felt his body spasm as he was peppered with rounds. There was a pause as their weapons went on cooldown, and that was all the time I needed. Wriggling out from under the corpse, I picked off one with a shot to the chest, and then turned my rifle on the second. A volley tore through her neck, and she collapsed in a bloodied heap. 4 down, 1 to go. Theoretically, the last guy should have been the easiest to take out, but the opposite seemed to be true in experience. This one was watching me with sharp eyes, and ducked just as I found my aim. My shot whizzed over his head, burying itself harmlessly in the wall. To make matters worse, my rifle buzzed in my hands, indicating that it was on a 5-second cooldown. Well, shit. His gun was almost recharged at this point, which meant I had to act immediately. I closed the distance between us with long strides, jabbing him in the gut with the butt of my rifle. With a sharp exhale, he stumbled backward, dropping his weapon on the floor. I reached for the loose firearm, but my action didn't go unnoticed. He kicked it away and moved toward me. Panic spurred me to swing my rifle at him like a club. Bashing him over the head didn't seem like the worst idea. Well, at least until I actually tried it. His hand shot up in a blur, catching the gun by the barrel. Before I knew it, the weapon had been wrenched out of my grasp. As it clattered to the ground, I realized I was in trouble. Hand-to-hand combat was never my forte, as it wasn't something the Jatari military trained in. With this guy's godlike reflexes, he certainly had the upper hand. I barely raised my fists in time to block a series of punches. While I was trying to parry his strikes, he swept my feet out from under me. Pain shot up my spine as I smacked against cold metal. He sank to my level in a flash, placing me in a headlock. Thrashing about, clawing at his face, none of it seemed to do any good. His grip around my airway only tightened, and I could feel my awareness dimming. A burning sensation pulsated through my lungs as my body screamed for oxygen. It was becoming increasingly hard to form coherent thoughts. A shroud of darkness was creeping into my perception. In a few moments, I would slip into its embrace. There was a sickening crunch, which I only faintly registered. My assailant's grip slackened, and I pulled free, gasping for air. An ache lingered in my throat where his arm had been, and I figured I'd have some bruises to show for our encounter. But without intervention, it could have been a lot worse.
What were you thinking? Engaging a group of them by yourself?
I glanced up to see Mac, Rykoff's security officer, accompanied by a team of 12 others.
You were a no-show, and now I see why.
I got lost, I sputtered. This ship is a damn maze. Mac paused.
I see. Well, I'll give your buddy there a good knock upside the head. When he wakes up, he'll be in the brig. Come with me if you can walk.
Thanks. I owe you one. I struggled to my feet, following after the burly man. Where are we going?
The bridge. I figure the boss wants you back.
What? I'm sure there are more of them. We have to...
There were. Past tense.
He growled.
Just, look at the scenery as we walk, eh?
A series of questions floated through my mind, which I figured were best left unanswered. Was he saying they cleared the entire ship? It couldn't have been more than 15 minutes since I set off on Rykoff's orders. The meaning of his statement became apparent as we entered the main passage to the bridge. Bodies were splayed out in the hallway, with blood and brain matter splattered on the walls. One of the corpses had a severed arm shoved down its throat, while another was sawed clean in half. I didn't even want to know. The brutality was revolting. Scenery? I stared around me dumbfounded. What the fuck, Mac? These guys are slaves. Did you have to butcher them? Rykoff said alive and you...
Calm down. These are no slaves. See the browns on their necks?
The human lowered his voice.
Your friend Bayan warned us about them. They're part of a doomsday cult that worships the AI and wants to help it bring about the end of days. Always on the front lines when they destroy a world.
I frowned. Even so, don't you think this is a bit excessive?
Not at all. In fact, I wish they suffered more.
I fell quiet. Deriving pleasure from another being's pain seemed cruel, yet Mac spoke as if it were the most normal thing in the world. It was in glimpses of their worst impulses that humanity terrified me. They were always a step away from becoming the monsters they despised. I hurried back to my post by the holodisplay, eager to get as far away from the mangled bodies as possible. Through the lens of the viewpod, I glimpsed the battle raging among the stars. While I had been preoccupied with the foot soldiers infiltrating our ship, the crewmates on the bridge had been clawing their way through a sea of enemies. A few hundred allied vessels were tucked away at our side, trying to withstand a barrage of plasma fire. To their credit, the Terrans were hurling an equal amount of ammo at the hostiles. The humans were hoping to find any weakness to exploit, any chink in their armor, but it was to no avail. The Devourer's shields were absorbing anything we threw at them. Our advance had slowed to a crawl, and we were on the verge of being pushed back.
General?
Commander Rykoff gave me a nod, his voice taut with pain.
Glad to see you in one piece.
Yes, others didn't share my good fortune, I muttered. The human's eyes narrowed.
What does that mean? We suffered casualties?
I averted my gaze, unable to look at him straight. Not to my knowledge. I mean, your boys carved up the aliens nice and good. If I didn't know better, I'd think a wild animal got to them.
Oh, I see.
Rykoff sighed, massaging his forehead.
Human emotions can run hot. My orders were clear, but I suppose they got a bit carried away. I'm sorry you had to see that.
I leaned over the command console, having nothing further to say on the matter. What was important now was completing the mission, and to do that, we needed to find a way through the enemy's stalwart defense line. But that seemed next to impossible now that they were privy to the Terran playbook. More human ships were slipping off the radar by the second. We needed to take drastic measures before we lost an entire fleet. What could we do that was completely unpredictable and would catch the Devourers off guard? Some sort of antimatter missile slammed into our hull, sending ripples through the flagship's frame. The overhead lights went out, replaced by a faint orange glow emanating from the floorboards. The computer systems went offline for a moment before humming back to life. A few of the humans glanced around nervously.
Primary power source inoperable. Emergency generator activated.
A mechanical voice said.
Shields at 12%.
I shook my head in disbelief. This is the same ship that breezed through the Federation's orbital defenses without a scratch.
That's not the first hit we took. Just the straw that broke the camel's back.
Rykov growled. The human idiom was lost on me, but I thought I understood the gist of it. We're running out of time then. Doesn't sound like we can take too many more hits. What do we do now?
Earth is depending on us, General. We carry on. We fight to the last. There's nothing else to be done,
he answered. That's not going to be enough. They're one step ahead of us at every turn.
Well, what would you suggest exactly? We're calling God to smite them?
We retreat.
You've got to be kidding, General. I'd rather die than live a coward. I just won't let my planet
I'm no coward, you know that. Breaking through their formation is impossible. We need to bait them forward, lure them to us. When they chase us, we outflank them. Rykov pursed his lips, considering my proposition. Despite the conviction in my voice, I wasn't convinced that my ploy would be effective. But with the human ship count ticking lower, our shields waning and our forward trajectory stalling, it was a necessary gamble. I just hoped the commander would arrive at the same conclusion.
Okay, so we drop back. What makes you think they'll follow us?
He asked after a long silence. I tried to imitate a human shrug. Just a hunch. They're arrogant, and from what I've seen, they don't like to leave survivors.
A hunch, you say?
He frowned, casting a final glance at the holodisplay.
Very well. I'll have an encrypted message sent out to the fleet. For all our sakes, I hope this works.
The commander called out a series of orders, setting the new plan into motion. The flagship banked sharply, reversing our course in a matter of seconds. We accelerated at full throttle. The quicker we got out of plasma range, the better. Our allies tailed after us, and the Devourers were left without any vessels to engage. The enemy remained stationary for a moment. No doubt they were bewildered by the humans' sudden departure. A coordinated retreat while the fight was still in the balance had to raise suspicions after all, but the chance to finish us off before we could regroup or jump to warp must have been too tempting. Our opponents tore after the withdrawing ships, guns blazing. I breathed a sigh of relief, even though that was only the first step in the plan. The next part was the most difficult, and would take the humans out of their comfort zone, acting like prey. The Devourers needed to smell weakness. The Terrans slowed their breakneck pace, allowing the pursuance to close the distance. An onslaught of missiles preceded the enemy's arrival, all bound for our largest battleships. I counted at least 20 warheads heading for the flagship, and hoped we could weather the storm once more. The first impact was almost indetectable, and it seemed that the damage might not be so bad. Then, several missiles struck in quick succession, and all hell broke loose. In their weakened state, our shields strained to keep up with such concentrated force. The floor quaked beneath my feet, powerful enough that I could feel my teeth rattling. A terrible groan came from the ceiling above, as though a pipe had burst. Sparks darted up the wiring of the walls, leaving an acrid scent in the air. My guess was that the cooling systems had taken the worst of it.
Fire reported in the engine room. Shields at negligible power.
The computer's voice was emotionless as always.
Evacuation of all personnel recommended.
Not happening.
Rykov clapped his hands together, a maniacal smile on his face. His ship was literally on fire, and he was excited.
It's our turn now, boys. Light 'em up.
The Devourers zipped toward our position. Clearly they had thrown all caution to the wind. The Terran vessels parted around them as they arrived, granting them access to the heart of the formation. We were swallowing them like a tasty morsel, and I don't think they even noticed. Well, not until they were already surrounded on all sides. After corralling the enemy, the humans nailed them with precise, relentless measures. Similar to how the flagship shields had crumpled, the Devourers' defenses just weren't designed for a 360-degree bombardment. Their logical AI master would never have planned for such a scenario, because there was no valid reason for the fleet to get boxed in like this. The humans softened up the enemy shields first, drilling them with steady laser fire from all sides. This was followed by the deployment of missiles as soon as their defenses began to wane. The primates seemed to have an infinite supply of world-ending explosives, as usual. Massive battleships and the nimble fighters alike blinked out of existence, no match for the combined power of antimatter and fission weapons. In panicked attempts to escape, some of the Devourer's ships collided with each other. Those vessels also became little more than 1,000 fragments scattered across the darkness of night.
Set course for their star at maximum speed,
Rykov barked.
No time to waste.
An ensign cleared her throat nervously.
Sir, our engine is overheating.
The commander crossed his arms, frowning.
Did I stutter?
The flagship cruised through the remnants of the fleet, finally having a lane into the Devourer system. I just hoped we could complete our mission before their offensive reached Earth. This was a race we couldn't afford to lose. The fate of humanity was hanging in the balance. A few enemy ships had lingered behind while their partners walked into our trap, though these vessels were in the minority. A cluster of 5 battleships blocked our path, as that was all they could muster. There were no new orders on the bridge, not even an acknowledgement of their presence. The flagship sped on, full steam ahead. Our exposed frame was scorched with plasma fire, which burnt a few holes into our metal hide. As atmosphere began to vent, automated processes sealed off the damaged ship sectors. It was going to take more than a few puncture marks to dispatch this Terran monstrosity. I winced as I realized we weren't slowing at all, and were mere seconds from ploughing into the defensive quintet. The Devourer ships were vulnerable to ramming tactics, sure, but were there really no other options? If the humans wanted to piss away $1 trillion credits, they could have done that without wrecking their finest craft. Hell, forget the economic toll. With the fiery situation in the engine room, a jolt might be enough to turn us into a smouldering wreck. Even under normal circumstances, there was no guarantee we'd make it out in one piece. I knew it was hopeless to reason with the humans, since brushes with death seemed to be an incentive to them. All I could do was find something to hold on to and send up a silent prayer to the universe. Even if we survived, this was going to be a bumpy ride. As we hurtled towards an imminent collision, the sounds of coughing filled the bridge. An involuntary shudder ran down my spine. While I knew it was rather commonplace for their species, I could practically feel the rattling of their lungs. The deteriorating conditions inside the flagship were affecting me as well. My eyes were burning from the billows of smoke that pooled in the air, and my skin was smouldering from the temperature, which had risen to an uncomfortable degree. With a glance around, I saw many of the humans tugging at the collars of their shirts. None of them looked too pleased with the environmental status either. If we stayed on board this vessel too much longer, we would all suffocate. With the shields down and the interior aflame, I expected the ship to crack apart on impact, but the Terrans, true to their suicidal tendencies, pressed on anyways. The 5 Devourer cruisers did not budge as we bore down on them. They only seemed to huddle closer together. As the final line of defense, they had to stop us, even at the ultimate price.
No protests, General.
Rykov's nose was swollen to the size of a small fruit, but he was smirking anyways.
I expected the word stop at least once.
I shook my head. Why bother? I don't want to waste my final seconds of existence.
Ha ha ha! You're quite the cynic, you know. Hell, we might even survive this.
He chuckled. My antennae twitched in confusion. Is that supposed to be reassuring? The broad hull of our ship plunged through the enemy line. Even with inertial dampeners at work, a jolt propelled me several lengths forward. I found myself prone on the ground yet again, wincing from another rough landing. The nanites in my veins could only mend so much tissue damage at once. I imagined I'd be black and green tomorrow. Before I could regain my footing, the humans rolled the vessel sharply to one side. An undignified yelp escaped my lips as I slid, shoulder first, into a workstation. What were they doing? Had their steering systems gone haywire? I felt the flagship start to tip back in the other direction, and clutched onto the base of the desk for dear life. An awful screeching sound resonated through the walls of our vessel, most likely our tough hide peeling away. But there were no worried callouts from the pilots or the computer, so the erratic rotation had to be intentional. Why would the humans want to tumble about, right in the wake of a collision? I pondered the question for a moment, and then an idea occurred to me. The Terrans were twisting their ship like a knife, carving a deeper gash. We were burrowing our way through the enemy craft, and tearing up their inner workings as we went. A crunching noise echoed from the bridge's exterior wall, drawing my attention. I saw a crack snaking its way from floor to ceiling, with several tendrils branching out from the root. Sure, our opponents had been taken out of commission, but our own ship was hanging together by a thread.
Severe damage reported to all sectors. Structural integrity compromised.
The computer's voice cut through the dead air.
Advised to power down the ship at once.
Rykov cleared his throat.
Computer, you don't recommend evacuation anymore.
Negative. That is no longer possible.
Came the reply.
Why not exactly?
The hangar bays and escape pods have sustained severe fire damage. They are inoperable. Advised to send out a distress signal and await rescue.
The inferno spread had escalated quickly, and if it continued at the current pace, it would reach the bridge in a matter of minutes. We had grinded to a halt in the aftermath of the collision, and were currently wedged nose first into the enemy vessels. Any more impact would fracture the flagship's exterior, so that meant breaking through the other side was not an option. The commander scratched his head, frowning.
Right, you heard what the computer said. All power to the thrusters, and once we're cleared of this wreck, we gun it to the Devourer star. Should be a walk in the park.
Maybe I wasn't the best at listening, but that definitely was not what the computer said. Our engines, which were nearing liquefaction by now, revved to life. We inched forward, slicing our way through the last of the enemy's plating. The ceiling overhead began to sag as its support faltered, and I figured it would come down on us. What hurt the most was knowing that how close we had come, and that we had failed in completing the mission all the same. Then, with a terrible shudder, the flagship was cleared of the wreckage. It had sawed 5 enemy craft in half, leaving behind only idle debris. Our frame quivered, still deciding whether or not to collapse. By some miracle, it was holding together. For now. As cheers erupted around the bridge, I looked toward the commander. The man had found a seat behind a weapons console, displacing one of his ensigns. It was a matter of seconds until we passed by the Devourer star, and it was ensuring the grav bomb was prepped for deployment. The terrible task of genocide was still ahead of us. There was no semblance of a smile on his face, despite our hard-fought victory. His eyes were turned out to the viewport towards the serene blue and white sphere that hung in the distance. A tear rolled down his face, and I suspected it had nothing to do with his physical injuries. Human compassion was so mysterious, and so antithetical to their violent instincts. The burden of slaughtering an entire species would eat Rykov up from the inside. He had admitted as much. Why would a man who so clearly despised this mission take the helm for its execution? The only answer I came to was that he wished to save his subordinates from the guilt. Noble to the last. His earlier speech about sacrifice was still ringing in my ears. "You don't come back the same person," he said. I didn't want him to change. I didn't want him to be anything like the cruel humans who maimed for sport, who savoured the kill. Without thinking, I grabbed Rykov by the shoulders and threw him unceremoniously to the ground. The nearest crewmates tensed up at my unprovoked assault on their leader, but I ignored them. My fingers acted on autopilot. The first step was to confirm the target, then...
What the?
The commander rose to his feet, looking more confused than angry. He noticed a few handguns aimed at me, and signalled for his men to stand down.
You really shouldn't attack someone on their own ship. Stand aside, now.
No, I muttered. Disbelief flashed in his eyes.
What do you mean, no?
I won't let you do this to yourself. You deserve better. My stomach churned as we glided into position across from the vibrant orange star. It was a dreadful feeling to have the power of annihilation at your fingertips. Let this one fall on my conscience.
I appreciate the thought, but I'm giving the orders here. It's on my conscience either way, General,
he replied. It hits different when you pull the trigger. I'd expect a soldier to know that. My hand was trembling, my voice hardly more than a whisper. I pressed the firing mechanism before I could talk myself out of it. No more General, by the way. That's First Officer. Or just Keelon to you. I was taken aback as Commander Rykov embraced me. Why did humans show affection by trying to smother people? I gritted my teeth, resisting the urge to squirm out of his grasp. It would be over soon, wouldn't it?
You're a good friend, Keelon,
he said. I sighed. Yes, but you smell like vinegar. Get off me. The human withdrew, stepping back.
That's not very nice.
I know. It's part of my charm, I replied.
You... All right. Quit staring, everyone. Time to get moving.
The commander swept a stern look around the bridge, and the crewmates snapped back to work.
We want to be long gone when this star blows her top. Let's hope we have enough juice to make it home.
Slipping into hyperspace was always rough, but this time blew all previous experiences out of the water. The pressure condensing in my ear canals stripped me of my hearing, and my stomach felt as though it was tied up in knots. Every particle of air was squeezed from my lungs, and my feet were glued to the floor. I was utterly powerless, trapped in a lifeless shell of a body. I wanted to scream, then to throw up, perhaps both at once, but my lips were locked together. The minutes stretched on for what felt like hours, and my desperation built to a frenzy. The paralysis dissipated as we emerged in range of Earth. I crumpled to my knees, spilling my guts on the floor. Embarrassment rushed through my veins until I realized most of the humans were doubled over as well. There was a reason ships with environmental regulation issues weren't supposed to enter hyperspace. If the system hadn't been about to go nova, I don't think even their deranged species would have tried it. As my senses returned to me, the most important concern crossed my mind. Had we dropped our payload in time to save Earth? There was no sign of Devourer spacecraft by the outer planets, which meant one of two things. Either they never reached the Terran system, or they had already taken it.
Unknown vessel, you are trespassing in Terran space. Your transponder is offline, which is a violation of planetary laws. Identify yourself at once.
A male voice crackled over the speakers. Rykov staggered to the holodisplay.
Orbital Command, I would hope you'd recognize your own flagship.
Jesus Christ!
The man's pitch rose sharply, presumably from shock.
Rykov, what on earth happened to you? Your bird looks like it got chewed up and spit back out.
We did crash it at full speed, but that's not the point. Request emergency landing at Mars Station. Need emergency vehicles on site.
Understood. You are clear to dock at any open port.
A strange mix of relief and sadness fogged my mind as we glided towards our destination. The knowledge that our endeavours had saved the Federation from certain death was a source of pride, but I wished there had been another way. If not for our arrogance, if we had finished what we'd started on that rescue mission a short time ago, perhaps there could have been. Humanity would be called to account by its galactic neighbours when they learned what we had done today. Maybe, just maybe, the two parties could learn from their past mistakes and find a path to reconciliation. If the Federation insisted on making the humans an enemy, they might get more than they bargained for. This war was over, but the next one, that was the one I truly feared.
As I was ushered through the Hall of Governance, I slowed to admire the artwork scattered throughout the premises. Murals depicting the cosmos, carvings of ancient deities, cultural artifacts from eons ago.
Commander Rykov.
The Yendel guard said my name slowly, since his species had the difficulty pronouncing the R sound.
Is there a reason you have stopped?
I shook my head. Just looking. It's fascinating. A showcase of every...
You can browse the exhibits at another time. The Senate is waiting.
He growled. Right. Perhaps I should have been irritated by this guy's impatience, but frankly, I was just happy he wasn't afraid of me. Most aliens I had spoken to since my arrival were walking around on eggshells, terrified of saying the wrong thing. Despite centuries of restraint and non-violence, they thought humans would snap on a whim. Why had Terran Command insisted on my testimony before the Senate? Why bother to comply with the subpoena? This would just be the next farce, the latest inquisition against humanity. I forced a smile as I strolled into the central chamber, sensing all eyes turned toward me. The new speaker was standing at the lectern, glancing over a briefing packet. His name was Redkey, formerly the Kovian ambassador. His species was middle of the pack on the aggression scale, and he was one of the younger representatives in the Senate. Other than that, I didn't know much about him, but I wasn't expecting him to give us a fair shake. This was his golden opportunity to prove himself and to earn political points with ULA supporters.
Commander Rykov of the planet Earth, please, have a seat at the designated bench.
Redkey's voice was smooth and silky, pleasant to the ears.
I'm sure you understand why you are here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am aware of what you wish to discuss, I replied. He tapped his claws on the lectern.
Very good. It has been an interesting few weeks, has it not?
I sighed. That is one way of putting it.
I think many of our listeners have valid concerns about the events that transpired. Would you not view your nanite weapons as cruel and excessive?
Depends who they're used against.
And who decides who deserves such a fate, Commander? I do not believe all humans are evil, as my predecessor did. But some of you are. You know this. What happens if your weapons fall into the wrong hands?
As tempting as it was to argue, this guy was actually making sense. All it took was a few trigger-happy idiots in the chain of command to set off Armageddon. The same reason nuclear proliferation had almost ended in human extinction. It was too easy to rush judgment, as we had almost done with the Devourers at the start of this mess, before we learned the full picture. Those are valid questions, Mr. Speaker. But let me ask you, what happens when the next Devourers come for us? I paused, giving my words time to marinate. How do we protect the Federation without some sort of deterrent?
Answering a question with a question. You should run for office, Commander. You're a natural.
A few light chuckles came from the representatives.
I can see the wisdom in having a last resort, as you say. But there needs to be fail-safes. Oversight, transparency. If you truly desire peace, these weapons do not belong in the hands of one species alone.
I narrowed my eyes. That's not my call, Mr. Speaker. Is there something else I can answer?
Yes. Your government has failed to offer a sufficient explanation for several matters. Let's start with the easy question. Where is General Keelon? Your ambassador claimed he was a passenger on your ship, and nobody has heard from him since.
Keelon? I was fortunate that he accepted the first officer position on my ship, given his intelligence and qualifications. But while he hadn't complained about his circumstances, at least to me, I knew his heart was with his home. It was my fault he would never see his planet again. The least I could do was preserve his honor and let him retire in the history books as a hero. He is dead. Uneasy murmurs rippled through the chamber, and I offered an apologetic glance to Jatari Ambassador Pelham. Shot through the abdomen during our shootout with the Zanik. Nothing we could do. Please, accept my most sincere condolences. He was a good soldier and a better man. Speaker Retke's eyes scanned my figure in a quick motion. It seemed he was gauging my body language. The truth not only would devastate Keelon, but would implicate the Terran Union in illegal genetic experimentation. If there was any hope of salvaging our relationship with the Federation, this was a cover story that they needed to buy. I bowed my head, closing my eyes. Images of the Devourer homeworld floated through my mind as vivid as when I had been standing on the bridge a week ago. The same memories I saw every night when I tried to sleep. Instead of pushing them away, I turned my focus on them. The sprawling oceans and the faint orange glows dotted across the landmasses screamed that life was present. I imagined the children witnessing their final sunrise, not realizing the fate that was about to befall their race. The heat wave, vaporizing the surface, extinguishing a million souls in an instant, a people doomed by their own creation. Perhaps in another life, we would have been friends. Or perhaps in another life, we would have suffered their fate.
Commander Rykov.
The speaker shouted my name into the microphone, jolting me out of my trance. His nostrils flared, which I believe was an expression of concern for his species.
I didn't mean to distress you. We'll change the subject.
I breathed a silent sigh of relief. Retke needed to see a genuine display of grief to be convinced, and that was the only way I could give it to him.
Next matter. I'd like to preface this question by expressing gratitude on the behalf of the Federation. If you hadn't stepped in, I think we'd be the property of the Zanik Republic right now,
he said. I hesitated. This speaker was tactful with his words, but something told me a but was about to follow. It was my pleasure.
That said, your government claims Ambassador Kazil was killed by friendly fire. I'd be more inclined to believe that if every individual in the Zanik line of succession didn't turn up dead within a day of the capital incursion.
Retke muttered. Is that an accusation? You know as well as I do there was a coup. Ordinary Zanik citizens seized the palace and executed their leaders. It was live streamed to the galaxy.
If only it were that simple. These were the most well-armed ordinary citizens I've ever seen. Do normal insurgents have sniper drones and automatic rifles on your world, Commander Rykov?
Well, the answer to that was affirmative, but saying that wouldn't portray humanity in a positive light. No, I suppose not. What are you getting at?
I'm saying someone armed them. Someone also gave the populace reason to rebel by flooding their economy with cryptocurrency, making it so they couldn't afford basic necessities.
Speaker Retke paused, meeting my eyes.
It would stand to reason the same entity is responsible for both things, and the Terran Union has already been linked to the financial attack.
I lowered my gaze. I'm not saying humans did it, but if we did, it would have been for the greater good. For centuries, the Zanik administration has been relentless in its pursuit of expansion and conquest. Their government required drastic changes to put a stop to it. A series of anxious whispers rippled through the assembly as my words were practically an admission of guilt. I risked a glance at the audience and noticed Ambassador Johnson in her assigned seat, shaking her head. It was clear she didn't approve of my response, but what else could I say? This new speaker was a bit too clever, and had already put the pieces together on his own. Denying it would just make us out to be liars and give the Federation further reason to distrust us. Retke waited for the conversation to die down before responding.
A naive, simple-minded way of thinking.
What is that supposed to mean? I demanded.
You assume the next government will be any better. You do not consider the possibility that it may be worse,
he replied.
The old regime was elected by the citizens. It carried out the will of the people. You cannot solve systemic problems by killing a few individuals.
I found myself agreeing with the speaker, in spite of my allegiance. The modus operandi of the intelligence agency was asinine to me. I had been telling my brother as much for years. By toppling the Xanic Republic, they had created a power vacuum. In all likelihood, they were replacing a democratic aggressor with an authoritarian one. A tired sigh escaped my lips. Time will tell. Is that all?
One more question. What happened to the Devourers?
He asked. Their star went nova, and their system was destroyed. It was technically the truth.
3 billion years before its natural end, and right as a fleet was on its way to Earth. Convenient timing.
Perhaps it was divine intervention, Mr. Speaker.
I think not. This is your last chance to come clean, Commander. Don't force my hand.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Then I'll show you. If you turn your attention to the projector, you'll see footage from a classified stealth probe that was monitoring the Devourer system.
Horror shot through my veins as a video began to play on the wall behind the speaker. It showed a lone vessel on approach to a luminous star. While the exterior of the ship was charred and flayed, the Terran emblem was still visible on the hull. It wouldn't have mattered if you weren't, since the make and model of the flagship was so distinctive. The Senate watched in stunned silence as the flagship deposited a capsule into the star's corona. Gravity did the rest of the work, drawing the projectile toward the surface. A sick feeling crawled into the pit of my stomach, and I wanted to beg Retke to turn the tape off. Instead, I just sat there, eyes glued to the screen. The speaker pressed the fast-forward button on his holopad and skipped ahead to the star's final moments. The fiery gases swirled down toward the core, like water circling down a drain. With a shudder, the vibrant orb collapsed in on itself. It shrank until it was no longer visible. All that remained was blackness where the star had been. For a few seconds, the universe was at peace. Then, there was a blinding white flash that washed out the camera's view. It only appeared on the projector for a moment before the transmission cut out. Suffice to say, that probe was a goner.
So tell me, was that a different ship that just happens to look like yours, Commander?
Disgust briefly flashed on Retke's face before he regained his composure.
You know, it would be nice to get a smidge of honesty from you humans. That bomb only has one purpose, the extermination of a species. Why would you build such a weapon? Please, enlighten me.
My mouth felt dry, and I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Why did the Federation have to bear witness to that atrocity? The representatives shared aghast expressions, and panicked chatter began to spread through the chamber. I caught some of the phrases, like several people calling humanity monsters and demons. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. We built it because we knew someday extermination might be necessary. Look, there was no other way.
Perhaps that is true, but what is necessary is not always right,
he said. So you think we're wrong? You think we're monsters just like everyone else, don't you? I stood up from my seat, red-hot anger racing through my body. This whole trial had been a trap, hadn't it? No wonder Retke had such a calm demeanor. He had that footage in his back pocket the whole time. What is it that you want? Humanity kicked out of the Federation? Me in prison for war crimes?
No. Actually, I was going to ask you to lead our military.
Impassioned protests broke out across the Senate, but the speaker raised a paw for silence.
Friends, the humans cannot help what they are, but they're trying to change. They've never wronged us. They managed to convince us that they were the most peaceful species in the galaxy for centuries. Mistakes have been made by all of us. I want to move forward together without hatred standing in the way. I believe this human and his associates will make us stronger and safer.
I gaped at Retke in disbelief. I don't know what to say.
You can think about it. But know, if you accept, this pattern of lies and omissions must end here. And for the universe's sake, don't invent any more bombs. I think humanity is more than enough as is. I'd like the galaxy to still exist tomorrow, you know.
Perhaps there was a future where we could be friends with the Federation once more. Things would be different, but maybe they should be. It was my sincere hope that we would never use our worst weaponry again. I wanted the galaxy to still exist tomorrow too.
Were the humans actually getting a reward for the genocide of an entire species? The Federation might as well remove the word peace and equality from its mission statement if the Speaker was putting those savages in charge of the military. An abominable race like theirs did not belong in positions of power, and it never would have happened under my leadership. I had done everything I could do to expose their nature, and just when I thought I was getting somewhere, the narrative shifted. The humans framed me as the villain, and the Federation bought it hook, line and sinker. One moment, I was their beloved Speaker, champion of democracy, protector of the innocent, and next, they kicked me to the curb. All on the basis of a few unsavoury memos from years ago. Where had I gone wrong? Was there anything I could have done differently? Okay. There would be plenty of time to think after I cleared out my office. I rummaged through the final drawer of my desk, searching for anything worth bringing home. Beneath the stack of documents, there was a single framed photo. It was turned upside down and covered by a thick coating of dust. This picture clearly hadn't been touched in years. Curiosity sparked in my chest, and I flipped it over. A younger version of myself was standing side by side with Ambassador Johnson, holding a document. I remembered that day. We had been at the signing of a war crimes treaty, which the humans sponsored. They said they wanted to mitigate suffering, and they had seemed so genuine in their commitment to peace. At the time, I wanted to be just like them. A growl rumbled in my chest, and I hurled the picture to the floor. The frame shattered, sending glass shards everywhere.
Careful. You wouldn't want to step on that while you're leaving this office for the last time at that.
A curse escaped my lips as I glanced behind me and saw Ambassador Johnson leaning against the doorframe. She was the last person I wanted to speak to. I had no idea how long she'd been there, but her smirk suggested she had seen enough. Come to gloat. You got what you wanted. Just leave me be, I spat. The human disappeared, and for a brief moment I thought she might actually leave me alone. Instead, she returned with a broom and a dustpan and began mopping up the glass shards. I clenched my teeth, repulsed by her proximity. You and your filthy species ruined everything. My life, my government, my job.
It's not that bad. Lots of positions out there to fill,
she chirped.
You know, I heard they're hiring at Galaxy Mart. I could see it. You in a nice green vest stocking shelves. The look would really suit you.
Oh, fuck off. Get out of here, I screeched. Ambassador Johnson snickered, and then, at last, departed from my office. I picked my box up off the floor and looked around the room a final time. This was supposed to be my life, but somehow it had been taken away. It didn't matter though. I would earn back the fickle citizen support by spreading the truth about the humans to anyone who would listen. Maybe I could make a blog or float around as a guest on the talk shows. Whatever it took to get the message across. There was a knock on the door and my skin prickled with annoyance. That was a human gesture to request entry, which meant Ambassador Johnson had come back. Wonderful. Stupid human, you've had enough fun. I'm on my way now, I muttered. A male voice, cold as ice, answered back.
I'm not human, and you're not going anywhere.
Something smooth and metallic pressed into the back of my neck, which felt like a gun. Fear surged through my body as it dawned on me what was happening. The humans had sent an assassin after me, hadn't they? I couldn't say I was surprised, but I couldn't fathom why he didn't just pull the trigger. I turned to face my assailant with slow, non-threatening movements. To my surprise, he was telling the truth. He wasn't human. I didn't recognize his species either. There were no flat-nosed, purple-skinned bipeds on the Federation's registry, to the best of my knowledge. Who are you? I stammered. The strange man nodded towards my desk chair.
Why don't you take a seat?
I inched back, following his instructions. We should talk about this. Whatever the humans paid you, I can give you more. Double even.
The humans have nothing to do with this. I'm here because everything I've known, everything I've ever cared about is gone. You have no idea of what true pain is.
Look, if you're depressed, there are ways to get help. You don't have to hurt me. You don't have to hurt anyone. Okay?
Oh, that's where you're wrong. I'm the last survivor of my species. Someone has to pay for that.
Something clicked in my head. Although it sounded ludicrous, how could anyone have survived a supernova? You're a Devourer, I whispered. His facial muscles twitched.
Don't like that word. My name is BM.
Okay then, BM. Listen to me. The humans were set on genocide from the beginning. There was nothing I could do. I forced a sympathetic expression onto my face. It was difficult to think with a gun pointed at my head, but I knew I needed to redirect his anger. Commander Rykov is the one you want. He's here, in the building. He killed your people, not me.
No. I needed to understand why this had happened, and it all leads back to you. Rykov tried to rescue us, but you sabotaged the stealth ships. In fact, with your sabotage, you tried to force the humans to kill us,
he said, voice shaking with anger.
They could have finished evacuating my planet if they didn't need a detour to deal with you. If you didn't start a civil war, and if they didn't need to repair their ship after. Ultimately, you are responsible.
It wasn't like that. You don't understand. I needed them to slip up, so the entire universe could see their true face in all of its ugliness. The humans have been conning the galaxy for centuries, while they plot and build up an arsenal to kill us all. It was a calculated risk to save the Federation from an evil you can't fathom.
A calculated risk? Is a planetary extinction event some minor sacrifice to you? You are the evil one. You don't deserve the nitrogen you breathe. Say goodbye to your miserable existence.
It seemed the talking BM down was out of the question. The Devourer had a crazed look on his face. His veins were about ready to pop out of his neck. His finger was hovering over the trigger as he tried to hold the gun steady. I wanted to call for help, but it would take me out as soon as I reached my holopad. Barring a miracle, this seemed like it would be the end. The door swung open and Ambassador Johnson waltzed in, looking at a piece of paper.
Ula, old pal. I had some time on my hands, so I drafted up a resume for you. Take a look.
The human glanced up, and the colour drained from her face as she spotted the gun. I wasn't sure whether to beg her for help, or to talk BM into shooting her instead.
Leave. Now. This has nothing to do with you,
he hissed. Johnson raised her hands in a placating gesture.
I've read about you in the mission reports. BM, right? Put the gun down. You don't want to do this.
Yes, I do. I want this vermin dead.
A tear rolled down his cheek and he quickly wiped it away.
I tried to serve my people, and I failed. Vengeance is all that's left.
It's not your fault. Please, don't let your pain and your hatred define you, BM. You're better than that. Revenge won't help in the long run.
I don't care if it helps. Why should she live, when millions will never see another day because of her? How is that fair?
It's not. People like Ula are terrible. Believe me, I agree with you. But if we stoop to their level, they win. And I'm too pretty to let them win.
That's where we differ, human. I'm more than happy to let Ula have her victory.
The Devourer checked the sights a final time, grinning at me. BM was about to dampen the trigger when Ambassador Johnson lunged at him, grabbing his dominant arm. She took it down as the gun went off, blasting a hole in the floor. The duo tumbled to the ground, wrestling for control of the firearm. My mind was reeling as I stared at the skirmish. Why was the ambassador trying to help? This was her chance to get rid of me without any blood on the hands of the Terran government. Humans were supposed to enjoy carnage anyways. There was no reason for her to put herself in the line of fire for a sworn enemy. Ambassador Johnson twisted at his wrist, trying to loosen his grip on the gun. BM reached out with his free arm and picked up a stray shard of glass from the floor. With a swift motion, he jabbed it into her thigh. The human yelped in pain, and her lapse in concentration allowed the Devourer to break free. He shrugged off her grasp and began crawling away. The thought occurred to me to run, or to join in the fray, but I was paralysed. Something in my brain had shut off, and I couldn't flip it back on. BM struggled to his feet, using the desk for support. He levelled the gun at Ambassador Johnson, who was nursing her wounded leg. Crimson blood had soaked through her navy blue pants, turning them purple. I didn't know much about human anatomy, but she must have been hit in some sort of blood vessel.
Stay down. I don't want to hurt you,
he pleaded. The gun swiveled back toward me, and I steeled myself for the inevitable. There was no sense in begging for forgiveness from either of them, because I wasn't sorry. Sure, my methods hadn't been perfect, but I was the only one brave enough to stand up against those human wretches, to make sacrifices for the well-being of the Federation. There was a sharp searing pain in my forehead, I crumpled in my seat, watching as the world became fuzzy. It was also grainy. So out of focus. I was dimly aware, in the recesses of my consciousness, of BM running from the scene of the crime. My ears registered the words of Ambassador Johnson, calling for help on a holopad. But I was too far gone to process anything but the cold sensation washing over my body. Nothingness overtook my senses, and I sank into the arms of the void.
Terran Command had reluctantly furnished a new vessel for us, after determining that the flagship was damaged beyond repair. This one had nicer accommodations, since its primary function was in a diplomatic capacity. Its maiden voyage would be tonight, as the humans were hosting an ensembler of Federation dignitaries and officers. The plan was to give a brief overview of Earth's military history, as well as its current arsenal. The new speaker was making a genuine effort to smooth things over, but I knew it would be difficult. Many of the representatives still struggled with the truth, and Ula's death had raised new suspicions, especially since Ambassador Johnson had been in the room when she was killed. While security footage of the assassination showed BM pulling the trigger, that hadn't stopped conspiracy theorists from claiming the Terrans orchestrated the whole thing, that the altercation between the Ambassador and the Devourer was staged. To be honest, I wasn't convinced they were wrong. Not that it would bother me if the humans were behind it. What nagged at me was witnessing my own funeral on television. I felt like a traitor to the Jatari, and that thought made me sick to my stomach. All I wanted was to return home, to reclaim my old life, to stand behind the helm of my own ship one last time.
Keelan, you look unwell.
I lifted my head, spotting Rykov at the entrance to my quarters. He must have just returned from the capital in advance of tonight's conference. Between his bloodshot eyes and the splint on his nose, I thought he looked worse than I did. I forced a smile. "Welcome back, Mikhail. Or is that General Rykov now?" He winced.
"I'm sorry. I never meant to steal your job. I haven't accepted yet. I can..."
"Don't be stupid. You deserve it."
"I don't know that I do, but thank you. Anyhow, I just wanted to let you know that you should be off the ship within the hour. It wouldn't be good for either of us to field questions about how you came back from the dead."
"I figured as much."
"Good. There's a shuttle waiting for you in the hangar bay. I've made arrangements for you to spend a couple of days planetside. Might help you adjust to human culture. And at worst, it's paid time off."
Anything beats dealing with politicians. You have fun with that.
At least these ones aren't... shouldn't speak ill of the dead.
The mention of Ula piqued my curiosity, but I figured I should refrain from asking about her. If the Terrans did arrange her assassination, then it wasn't a subject they wanted to discuss. Learning their secrets never ended well at any rate. It was how I got stuck here in the first place. When it came to humans, some questions were best left unanswered. I stared at the floor, trying to quell the resentment brewing in my mind. We probably shouldn't speak about her at all. Rykov must have read something in my expression, because his eyes narrowed.
You want to know if we killed Ula, don't you? As far as I know, we weren't directly involved.
That implies you were indirectly involved, I pointed out.
Well, I feel sorry for BM.
A remorseful expression crossed his face, and his voice became subdued.
I sensed something was off the last time he was here, after the refugee camp was destroyed. But I never thought this would be the result.
Nobody could have expected that. I mean, how did he even get a gun into the hole in the first place?
That's the crazy part. He tagged along with the press and slipped the gun into a sound engineer's bag. Security barely gives media a second glance. Once he got past the metal detectors, he just pickpocketed it back.
Clever bastard. Perhaps he has a chance on the run.
Maybe. For what it's worth, I hope we never find him.
Something tells me you won't look that hard.
I think I've already said too much, Keelan.
I fought back the scathing reply in my head, which was that it didn't matter. There was no love lost between Ula and the Terrans. Of course they wouldn't be chomping at the bit to bring her killer to justice. Who was I going to tell that wasn't human anyways? Right then. Well, I suppose this is goodbye, I said.
For now. Take care of yourself, all right?
With that, Rykov waved farewell and disappeared down the corridor. As solitude presided once more, my longing to reach out to my people grew insatiable. In the name of friendship, could I watch the Terran military, at best, render my species obsolete? Was preserving my image really more important than ensuring the survival of my race? The humans slumbered now, but their history showed what they were capable of under the right circumstances. It seemed unlikely they would set off a supernova in the middle of the night, but the problem was that they could. The only way to counter such a possibility was to catch up to their technology, like how Earth had superweapons tucked away just in case. If the worst came to fruition, the Jatari deserved a fighting chance. Risks be damned. This was my final service to my planet. I fetched a razor from my go bag and sliced it across the palm of my hand. Then, my fingers uncorked an empty water bottle, and I allowed my blood to drip into the container. The nanites sealed off the wound with haste, but not before a usable sample had seeped to the bottom. I pried a piece of paper from my notepad and laid it out on my desk. As I fished out a pen, the words seemed to flow from my hand of their own volition. The new arms race is upon us. The entire Federation is scrambling to imitate human technology. But with this blood sample, we can be the first. This is just a taste of their classified genetic engineering project. Research in this field should stay our little secret. Building an arsenal should be the primary focus, but as you can see, there are civilian uses for the nanites as well. Medicine, construction. Just don't let the humans see we've caught up. They wouldn't react well to us leveling the playing field. Hell, it might incentivize them to build something worse. Trust me, keep this one off the books. A friend. I folded the note, then attached it to the bottle with a rubber band. A glance at my holopad confirmed the route to the guest chambers. As a newly minted Terran officer, I had clearance to review tonight's guest list as well. Jatari Ambassador Palom was booked in for room C14, which therefore was my destination. The mission was quite simple. Drop off the parcel, then head to the hangar bay for a well-deserved vacation. All I knew as I set off from my quarters was that this felt right. Several humans crossed my path, but they were of no concern. As long as I acted normal, I knew they wouldn't give me a second glance. My detour to room C14 was brief anyways, in and out, before any onlookers could develop suspicions. It took only a few seconds to slip the package beneath Palom's window, and then I carried on to the hangar bay as planned. With any luck, the Jatari ambassador would notice my correspondence when he retired to his chambers. Would Commander Rykov understand if what I had done ever came to light? If our roles were reversed, I doubted he would abandon Earth. Perhaps in my position, he would have taken similar actions. It was too much to ask of a soldier to turn his back on those he swore to protect. The potential consequences of my decision were not to be understated. I knew that. We were dealing with the humans' warfare, the kind without honor and without winners. This breach not only risked incurring the Terrans' anger, but also elevated the chance of galactic destruction. The more parties that possessed nanite weapons, the more likely it was that someone would use them. But those dangers could be dealt with at a later date. It didn't matter that we were living in a tinderbox unless someone created a spark. I was going to put the terrible things I had witnessed out of my mind, in the hope that one day they would be truly forgotten. Today, it was my intention to live it up, and to hope the humans stayed friends for a little while longer.